Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Lawrence City Commission for the purpose of being able to continue the process of selecting an individual to fill the vacancy created in the Lawrence City Commission. I want to thank each one of the candidates on behalf of the Commission and on behalf of the entire community for stepping up at a time when we needed folks to step up and be great Lawrence citizens, and you've all done that, as everyone who has gone through the process. A few items to talk about tonight. This is the background on the item. In the event of a vacancy on the Lawrence City Commission, like we have now, the remaining commissioners are required to elect by a majority vote a person to fill the vacancy. The city code is silent, however, as to how the commission shall go about selecting a person to fill that vacancy. At the August 18, 2015 City Commission meeting, we decided to accept applications for the vacant seat and to convene a special committee to review those applications and forward to the City Commission a list of candidates to fill the vacant seat. The special committee completed its charge, and the City Commission formally accepted on Tuesday of this week the special committee's list of recommended candidates. The Commission is now tasked with interviewing the 6 candidates recommended by the special committee and narrowing the field to 1 or 2. The final vote of the City Commission to fill the vacant seat will occur at our regular meeting next Tuesday, October 6th at 5:45. The itinerary for tonight's meeting is as follows. The first portion of tonight's meeting will consist of commissioners interviewing the candidates. The commission has 8 prepared questions. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to answer those questions. The candidates will take turns being the first candidate to answer a question. After all 8 questions have been asked of each candidate, the City Commission shall ask follow-up questions. And at the conclusion of the follow-up questions, each candidate will be allowed to make a closing statement limited to 2 minutes. After the Commission has concluded the interview portion of tonight's meeting, the public may make comments directed to the City Commission. Each speaker addressing the Commission will be limited to 5 minutes or less if we have a lot of people who want to speak, and I'm going to guess that we're going to have a lot of folks that come tonight. We ask individuals who wish to address the Commission to come to the microphone, state your name, and sign into the record. Individuals should feel free to speak in favor of any candidate, but please speak with respect and civility for all candidates. After the public comment is closed, the Commission may engage in a discussion before each commissioner completes a ballot listing his or her top 3 candidates. Each candidate receiving a first-place vote shall be accorded 3 points. Each second-place vote shall receive 2 points, and the third-place vote will receive 1 point. After the votes are tabulated by the city attorney, the top 2 will be announced. We will select a member of the commission to sit in on those tabulations. Okay? So you'll be thinking about who that may be. Before we get started, I request that everyone place their cellular phones on silent. I ask that the audience refrain from talking, whispering, or gesturing while the candidates are answering questions. And please, no outbursts or applause. This is probably one of the, if not the most important decisions that this body will make during this early part of our term. We have gotten a lot of help from a great many people in this community, and the candidates are due every bit of our attention. I do want to say one other thing. I want to again thank our committee, and Joe Harkins is here this evening, for all the work that they've done. I especially want to thank our staff, Tony and Bobby, for everything. It's everything that they've done. Diane and Casey. I do want to say that the timekeeper for tonight will be Bobby Walthall. She will be in charge of the 2 minutes. And Casey Tomei will take, and she'll be the bell ringer, so she'll be able to tell you when it's over. So I am not the one that's having to do all of this. Commission members will be the ones asking their original questions, and we are going to go in an order. I didn't tell you about this part. We're gonna jump around, but I'll point to you when I want you to do the deal, or say it's your turn. Okay? Any other questions or comments?
just want to reiterate that, when public comment is absolutely welcome, but if you would, please keep your comments of a positive nature for the candidate of your choice and not in an attacking manner. Last night I overheard a comment that I've been thinking about all day, and that was civility is the cost of admission. And, we don't ask you to pay to come in here by any means, but we do ask you to remain civil. And we have 6 people who have worked very hard to get to this point. And regardless of what you think of any of the 6, they've worked very hard to get to this point, and they deserve respect.
Okay.
And certainly, we weren't allowed to have a special election, and this is the closest thing that we could kind of approximate to an election. And I think it was a really good process, so I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. So, Stuart, did you have anything?
I just want to say thank you to the candidates for stepping up. We were in a bind, and we appreciate you trying to help us out. And I'd also like to thank staff.
Okay. One other group to thank in all of this process is to thank the public. We have had so many comments, and I know each one of us have, whether it be email, people stopping us on the street, offering all kinds of assistance in this. So a special thank you to our public who has been really involved, really engaged in a lot of the of this entire process. So I want to thank everybody for making it work. So that's where we are. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and begin the questioning tonight. Our first questioner is going to be Commissioner Boley.
Okay.
And this is going to be, we're going to start with Mr. O'Brien tonight.
So the question is, what can we do as commissioners to ensure that Lawrence remains home to working people of modest means?
Thank you for that question, and thank you, commissioners, for offering me this opportunity to share some of my thinking with you. I think affordable housing strikes me as an issue that kind of creeps up on a community, almost like a variation of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Imagine that at a place like Lawrence, some might wonder, how can people not find a place to live? For renters, we seemingly have 3 markets: a college student market, a market for those who cannot afford above $400 per month, and those that can't afford $500 and up. And while the market seems to be able to address the needs of students and those that can afford $500 or more, there does seem to be a shortage for the under $400 monthly rent market. This makes sense given the difficulty of making a profit from complex places where units rent for under $400. So one of the things we might have the commission kind of consider is whether or not the number of dwelling units per acre to make those more, so as to be able to have people be able to build more complexes with smaller units. What are the implications then also for a unit, for a community where we have the rent begins to exceed those that own? This seems like a situation that's about to kind of become present here in Lawrence. And I raise this point kind of in light of the national problem with a tremendous amount of student debt that a lot of those kind of in the 20s and early 30s face. So what are the implications that this might have for kind of first-time home buyers? And while I realize that at the moment the housing market for Lawrence is relatively well balanced, I do kind of question the future of the starter home market. Also like to kind of learn more about the impact of housing development on older to low, moderate income neighborhoods, particularly given how such neighborhoods often are home to older people. So how is the housing market readying itself for an increasingly aging population? And finally, how might the commission expand the efforts with an organization like Justice Matters to include those from the business sector to explore economically feasible approaches to affordable housing? So how might we best facilitate and integrate affordable housing, economic development, and environmental sustainability? As Lawrence continues to grow, I hope that the future development will then kind of close my comments with that, and I hope that begins to kind of at least address some of my thinking on affordable housing.
Mr. Sean.
Good evening. This is sort of like asking me how to build a rocket ship and get through the asteroid belt to get to Mars and not get struck by an asteroid. The problem is that this is one of the most complex questions that this commission or any other commission has ever been asked to address, because there are so many factors that the commission can't control. The question asks about how can we ensure that the city remains a livable place for the working class. Well, I guess, first of all, I don't know that the city can ensure anything. It can encourage, through tax policy, land use decisions, and general community bully pulpiting, if you will, to cause the community to recognize the need for neighborhoods where people, no matter their means, can live. Lawrence, I described this to a friend of mine the other day. Lawrence is like, if you think of Lawrence as west of about Iowa and then east of that same street, it's like twins from different mothers. And there are people who live west of Lawrence, west of Iowa rather, who make a fair amount of money. There are a lot of folks who work in this community who make $8, $9, $10, $11 an hour. They have a hard time living anywhere in the city of Lawrence because according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you're working class, you shouldn't spend more than no one should spend more than 30% of their income for rent and utilities. If you make $8 an hour, about $16,000 a year, that doesn't leave very much money on a monthly basis for rent and utilities. So the real answer, the ultimately real answer is better paying jobs. Jobs in town that add value, jobs that pay more than $8 an hour. There's nothing wrong with an $8 an hour job, except you can't afford to live in Lawrence if you make $8 or $9 an hour. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I struggled with these questions. A lot of them, I think there's a background to that there's a specific answer and then there's a general answer. And what I'm trying to bring tonight is some general answers to say, I think a cohesive vision for the future of Lawrence answers a lot of the questions. And by that I mean, if we can have a general understanding of how to grow the tax base and in agreement and cohesion with economic development, I think that'll reduce taxes for everybody and provide new professional jobs.
Excuse me a second. Sorry.
Okay. I think that's a mix that's very delicate, and it's hard. Am I not speaking loud enough? Can you hear all right?
No.
Okay, all right, thanks for letting me know. I think this cohesiveness between the different bodies within Lawrence is important, and I think that's how you get things done, and I think that's how you get results. I think our community is looking for results, and I feel like sometimes the community puts expectations in the wrong place because there haven't been the proper leadership. So let me give you some specifics because that's pretty general. We've got to stop the sales tax expansion. To me, that's a showstopper. It's like every time we turn around, we're adding sales tax. I think with affordable living, that's as important as any of the other issues that I've heard mentioned. That's the central factor in my mind. Economic development comes on the tail of that, where if we can provide better paying jobs so that people can afford to live the way they'd like to live is a critical factor. Now let me tie this together because I've got a bunch of friends that live affordably and they want to live the way they want to live, and our community should support that. Thank you.
To the candidates, if you could hold that microphone up so folks in the back could hear. I'm sorry? Okay. Or just,
Does this work?
perfect.
Good. Thank you for the opportunity tonight. It's good to be here. One of the things that I think that when we talk about modest means is we need to provide goals. And you'll hear me talk a lot, I think, about goals tonight. And I think this should be one of the goals that we help people in the city. One way we do that, I still think I go back to the bus system. A lot of people don't have cars. They have to get to work. They have to get across town to grocery stores. They have to get to physicians' offices. And for us to provide a system where we do that is great. I was extremely pleased that the city has made this a priority of the citizens when we passed the sales tax about 7-8 years ago. I think mental health support is very important because we need to help people with that. We can't provide all the care, but we can make it easier to get into, and we can provide situations where they can attain it. Mental health is a big reason why people don't have jobs, why people can't keep a job, why you can't keep families together. Being careful with the taxes, I would agree with the other two. We need to be very careful with taxes and try to keep them to a minimum, at the same time provide services for the citizens. Affordable housing for the young, for the middle-aged and retirees. I work with the Campus Village, and one of the things that we're trying to do is create a village concept. I think this is very important because we need to create a situation where we take care of each other. Another thing is the living wages. And once again, the CDBG grants, I think, need to be emphasized. They're a method that we have that can help parts of the town that don't have as much economic ability. Thank you very much.
Larson?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think there's two items that I would like to cover under this question. One is affordable housing, and the other is a living wage. I believe we need to maintain an adequate supply of affordable housing using a combination of existing housing as well as new construction or new housing. I think we need to find ways to offer incentives to neighborhoods to maintain and upgrade existing housing, and if incentives are determined to be the way to go, the good way to go, then I would strongly encourage that we promote energy-efficient upgrades, including but not limited to solar and geothermal. I think we should find ways to hold down property taxes in neighborhoods that undergo significant changes. We need to ensure that those on fixed or low income that those that are on fixed or low incomes will not be taxed out of their home. We need to plan. We need we will not be able to do all things for everybody, obviously, but we should prioritize the needs and develop a plan that makes the biggest long-term impact to the livability of our neighborhoods. As far as the living wage goes, I personally believe that any adult who is willing to work a 40-hour work week, week in and week out, show up and do their job, should not have to rely on welfare to maintain a modest lifestyle. This wrongfully strips people of their dignity. I would encourage and offer incentives to companies to move to Lawrence that are willing to pay a wage that at minimum supports a modest living. And I would also encourage existing companies that do not pay a living wage to raise their pay scale or possibly offer incentives to raise their pay levels to levels that would support a modest living. We should encourage companies that consider employees access to welfare as part of their, we should not encourage companies that consider their employees access to welfare as part of their payroll plan. And I would also, I also believe very strongly that companies do have a social responsibility to pay their employees a living wage. Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. As many people have already said on these things, there are a lot of things you need to do to make this work for working people. You need affordable housing. You need good schools. I think that gets overlooked sometimes. Obviously, you have a school district that's their primary job, but the city needs to cooperate to encourage those, because that's very important to any working class family. You need reasonable taxes. The word I focused on, though, in this question was working. I think that is the key to everything. I think you need to have strong economic development. You need to encourage jobs both from the outside and from growth on the inside. You need to understand the importance of the gig economy now and the way that people develop jobs in the modern economy. You've got to be encouraging. It doesn't mean you roll over for businesses, but it does mean that you are welcoming to them, that you set high standards, and that you work to get them in here, because it's the jobs that will make all the rest of this possible. Now, within the specific of affordable housing, you've got that as one of your goals. It should be, but you've got a lot of different things that make up how you go after affordable housing. One of the things I'd be interested in looking at is the use of the neighborhood revitalization in encouragements. incentives, I don't understand exactly how they've been used in the past, and there's a lot of detail I would need to catch up with. I don't understand the use of them for the apartment complex across from the stadium. There's no affordable housing in that. That seems to be a distortion of that's intended purpose. I think there are neighborhood by neighborhood places where these kinds of uses could be very valuable. I understand the concerns with East Lawrence, and I think that's a unique neighborhood that's got some real concerns about gentrification in terms of its proximity to downtown. But there are an awful lot of great neighborhoods out there, Indian Hills, Prairie Meadows, Prairie Park, that have good, modest housing that could stand to use some encouragement from the city in terms of these incentives. Now, we need to look at it. We need to work with the neighborhood so we're not the government showing up and saying, hey, we're here to help you. But if it's a good fit, I'd like to look into that. Thank you.
The next question will be from Mr. Shawner and will be by Vice Mayor Sutton. First question.
It's possible for us to have about 30 seconds between questions.
Sure. David, just wait for 1 second. Filling in paperwork.
I'm at your disposal.
I'm sorry.
I'm at your disposal.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
How do you interpret the results of the election last April, and how will that influence your decisions as a commissioner?
I think the vote last April indicated pretty substantial dissatisfaction with what many people saw as business as usual, the influence of big money, and the lack of transparency in decision-making at City Hall. As I read for months and months and months all the discussion about Rock Chalk Park, I had a heck of a time following exactly what was going on and who was making what decision and who was paying for what. And maybe that was just my inability to follow the discussion, but I don't think so, because I think the general public came away from the Rock Chalk Park episode pretty discouraged and upset about the way that was handled. Whether there was anything materially wrong with the way it handled, I don't think really matters. I think the public believed that there was a substantial lack of transparency, that the fix was in, that certain people were going to make a certain sort of profit out of that construction. You add to that then the police facility vote. I think there was a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction with the price of that project, the lack of long-term transparency. There was a lot of information available about that process, but I think when people heard $47,000 an acre to build a building when the city has other options at a time when people are suffering and trying to make rent and housing payments or utility payments, I don't think that sat very well with folks, and I think their active voice was, I don't want more of that same. I want people to be more responsible on the commission with my dollars, add value to the dollars that I pay as a taxpayer. And I think the result was the people that were up for re-election, many of them who were on the commission at the time those decisions were made, were simply not returned to office.
Mr. Watson.
Another good question. Thank you, Leslie, for the question. Again, difficult to answer specifically, but in general, Lawrence needs change. Lawrence wants change, and I think that's what they voted for. I think they'd also like an increased level of transparency and responsibility, and the police station with the failed vote, I think, demonstrated that. I think at the root of this is better communications. And right now, my frustration is I have a difficult time understanding what the commission wants to do, what its goals are, and where it's headed. And I think one of the most important things this commission needs to do in the next year is to establish a vision that's supported by activities and encourages neighborhood participation with some type of a vision of where we go together. And right now, I feel like we all act independently, and we don't recognize how different services intertwine. Now, I'd like to add, I think in our community we have a great example of effective leadership, and that's our current hospital. I think the hospital represents a similarly sized institution that has a strategic planning process, that sets goals, that monitors performance, that informs their board of what the facts are so that good decisions can be made. And boy, do we need those in healthcare. And I would add, boy, do we need them in city government. And I think I can help do that.
Dr. Reardon.
I've asked this question many a time to myself, and I come up with different answers. To me, one of the first answers that I thought is that the people really want to be listened to. And I think the previous city commission, before I was on, did not listen to the citizens, because there was, in a big extent. They did change slightly, and they did have a bid process, but I think in general, they didn't listen, and that's what we need to do as commissioners. One of the reasons I asked Diane and the city to start Lawrence Listens is just for that reason. We need to have ways that we can have people have input. Second reason, I think, is because they were just mad. I think some people are mad on a local basis, some are mad on a national basis, but they were mad for reasons. There were concerns about incentives. How should we use these incentives? And I think as city commissioners, we don't have a good method of saying, what is the goal of this particular incentive? What are we trying to achieve with it? If we can set those goals aside, then we can decide better how to allocate those numbers. When we had the NRAs, I was always surprised because I always thought that would be on a small basis, not a large basis. I think there was a distrust of power. But, you know, these things are things in the past. These things have occurred. We have gone on. We have a different city now than we had then. We have a city now where we have a difficulty because we had a commissioner do some things that shouldn't be done. But those lessons that we learned are not in the past. They should be in the present. We need to listen. We need to involve citizens more. We also need stability, and we need insight. And these are the things that I hope to help bring to the City Commission and use the information and my education that has occurred. Thank you.
The citizens of Lawrence spoke very, very loudly and very clearly about many aspects of their governing body during this last election. They spoke about the overuse and improper use of tax abatements and other incentives. They spoke about the need to thoroughly vet the merits of a project, about actively listening to citizen voices. Citizens felt that some commissioners just weren't listening, and some had no interest in what citizens had to say. They felt like they said they needed a more transparent government. Projects were being pushed through without transparency or adequate information. I think this election spoke to Lawrence's stated commitment to be a sustainable community. And sustainability includes ensuring that projects are economically viable, environmentally friendly, and socially acceptable. All of these three criteria have to be equally balanced in order to meet that sustainability commitment. Many of the controversial issues were not socially acceptable. The citizens felt the system was out of balance, so they used the biggest tool available in their toolbox to demand balance and make their voice heard. They voted. And they voted in those who promised that the citizen voices would be heard and the citizens' voices would play a vital role in their decision-making process. What I will do, if elected to be on this commission, is I will ask more questions, I will actively listen, I will weigh the evidence, and make sure I understand why people think the way they do, especially if it is a point that I've not heard of before. And I will ensure that those who I both agree and disagree with will fully know why I voted yes or no on a particular project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
having been involved in many elections through the years, some of which I've won and some of which I haven't, and not just campaign issues, there's also been, ballot issues, bond issues, different proposals that I've been actively involved with. There are a lot of messages that come out of any election and the results. And you have to be careful not to read too many details into those results. It was clear from this last election that there was the general disagreement and the trust had been broken with that commission. And when a representative government loses that trust, well, then you have what happens. And I think that it is vitally important that whoever gets on this commission and the commission as it moves forward works to reignite that trust, to reengage that trust, and to realize the importance of process. Process is at the basis of everything in Lawrence, and you've got to keep that in mind. I think if you go too much deeper than that into specific issues as far as a mandate, it gets a little fuzzier the deeper you go, because each of, for instance, the three of you who were elected this last time, each of you have differences of opinion in various issues, as you should, the community does. But you do need to take away the big one, which is process and trust matter. And in all the elections through all the years, that's when people get knocked out, is when there's a break there. And so I think it's important that we reestablish that, and I think this community responds well to that in a representative government. Thank you.
Mr. O'Brien.
Now, the dilemma with going last is, of course, is that everyone has already said the good stuff. So I'll try to kind of add to something to that. So if I'm looking at kind of what happened back in the spring, kind of in a nutshell, I would say there was a concern over budget priorities relative to matters like kind of the Rock Chalk Park and the police station. I think there was an emphasis on the importance of transparency relative to city's future development, and I think there was a need to discern how to better engage the community in budgetary and development matters. Let me kind of give you kind of one example of what I would like for us to maybe be able to start doing a little bit better, and that's how to be able to put kind of major development projects into a larger community context. One of the concerns with major municipal forms of economic incentives, such as a tax finance incentive district, is the opportunity cost. Is you put a project in place, and then what happens is then you have to assess it, but in all fairness, you can't assess it on what was not done. And so that then kind of leaves me wondering, relative to the last election, is how much of what happened with Rock Chalk Park was ended up kind of influencing people's perception of the police station. Now, in turn, I also recognize, and as already been mentioned, that these are complex issues, and the police station also dealt with issues related to kind of the increase in a sales tax to kind of fund it, as well as concern over maybe not enough evidence to be able to support the need for a centralized place, as kind of Scott brought up last time. So I think another issue that I would also like for us to kind of give some hard consideration to, is kind of mentioned in my application, this emphasis on kind of building in, building up, and building out. And so relative, for example, to some of the incentives programs, that projects that have already been underway, is what's happening on New Hampshire Street is now the new norm to 6 to 7 story buildings all along that place. I mean, that would almost seem like that would be the case if I was a developer, and I was realizing if I want to be given kind of a situation where I'm able to gain the most, offer up a huge project, and then what do you have happening is a very dramatically new look to the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you all want to take a minute to... Commissioner Herbert, you'll go next.
Do you have a preference on question?
Doesn't matter. The first question, Commissioner Herbert's first question, we'll begin with Mr. Watson.
Thank you.
Mr. Watson, the city of Lawrence has a population of nearly 93,000, and yet on any given Tuesday, City Hall hosts less than 30 citizens at our weekly meeting. As a seated commissioner, what are your plans to engage the community who do not attend meetings in the process?
Great question. I think anybody that wants to listen to 93,000 people has got a pretty challenging activity ahead of them. And I think it's a good question to ask, because it goes to the core of our city government. My guess is there's some people with masters in public administration that spend careers trying to understand and improve that. What does the commissioner do, and how can a commissioner help? I think the main tool seems to be, in our existing structure, a website and the Journal World. That leaves me concerned because many times, instead of getting an answer to a question from a city official, I get an answer that says, well, just check the website. Well, this week I checked the website for our goals, and I had trouble finding them. I shouldn't say I had trouble finding them. I found a lot of them, way too many, and I couldn't put them together. And then when I thought about how do I try to understand what 93,000 people think about those goals, I was truly perplexed. And then for the final nail, I realized I didn't have time to get a master's in public administration to answer the question. Sorry. What do we expect? You know, the City Commission needs to set out some expectations. We do that with goals and objectives. We do that with a financial plan that makes sense and that's understandable. We can improve our website. We can improve our communications. But we've got to do it as a group. I think most of the culture of our city government is enforcement. We enforce the codes. We enforce the speed limit. We enforce fire protection. We do things to encourage people to behave safely. All of those things are how do we control our community. I think our opportunity today is how do we encourage new actions that move Lawrence forward. Thank you.
Dr. Reardon?
I probably had more problem with this particular question than any other, because to give you a real answer is difficult. Because some of the citizens will be engaged, some will never be engaged, but I think there's a large majority out there that could be engaged if we could do something to do that. Once again, I go back to Listening Lawrence, try to get people information, because I think if you give them information about what you're doing and how you're doing it, you perk their interest. You're doing things that affects them. The other is that you can have information going out to them through the internet, letting them know what things are going on. Because sometimes I didn't know that. Well, I didn't know we were doing that. So if we can get that information out to them and use the systems that we have, in medicine we now have portals where people can come in and get information and we can send information out. We also need to look at what other cities are doing. We have a city right near us, Olathe, that's doing a lot of things that is engaging their citizens. Let's look at that city. Let's look at other cities and what they're doing. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to do something. Town hall meetings are very inefficient. You get 15, 20 people there, but you get a lot of information. So I think you need to utilize your time well, but some use of town hall meetings would be good. I think the use of polls would be good, but I would hate a situation, and I think Commissioner Herbert has used some polls in a good way, but you have to be careful, because if all you do is follow a poll, why do you need city commissioners? You have to interpret that data. You have to take what that says, and you don't do what's popular, you still should do what's right. We can consider remote sites going out and doing things elsewhere. It does create problems that we might or might not be able to solve. So I think those are just some of the things that we can do to help engage citizens and make them feel important.
Thank you. Carson?
To start, I would want to know a little bit more about the streaming website that we have where you can sit at home and watch the meetings on TV. And I would also want to know how commissioners feel about this level of participation. Do you consider it to be an active participation? And should we further engage this method to make it more interactive with the commissioners? That's one tool. I believe another tool is to encourage participation is that the commission be fully transparent in their processes. This could alleviate some of the apathy that we see. I believe that more trustworthy and transparent that we are as a collective body, the more apt that citizens will want to engage because they trust that their voice matters. Another tool that I would support is using a larger space when discussing controversial issues. This sends a very strong signal that as a governing body, we want a large participation. It's wanted and it's expected for these issues. And of recent, social media, I believe, is being used as a public forum. I cannot see myself using this type of forum. I would be fearful that I would post something inappropriately, inadvertently, or it would be misinterpreted. So prior to voting on a project, I believe it is vital to allow citizens to engage their commissioners both before the commission meetings and after an item has been discussed by the commissions at the commission meetings. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan.
I think one of the things I learned in my 8 years on the school board was the importance of any elected person to remember that the group of people in front of you at any given meeting, whether it's an official meeting or a task force or a neighborhood group or whatever, is but a small slice of the group you're representing. That's an important thing to keep in mind. And what I did, which may sound kind of weird, but I mean, when I'd be shopping, whether it was downtown or at Dillon's or at Hy-Vee, Checkers, Walmart, wherever, is to look around and realize how many people you just don't know. We know lots of people. We are all actively involved in lots of different things. And when we run into people, we know a lot. But there are a lot of people in this town who are good, hardworking people who commute, who do whatever, and you don't know them, and you need to remind yourself all the time so that you're aware. Because when you're trying to engage a community, you first have to be aware of the breadth of that community, and then you need to apply or start using whatever formal and informal methods. There are the formal ones of task force, of putting together groups. There are the informal ones of the networks you have and organizations that you're part of, churches and associations that you belong to. There's the pre-existing groups of neighborhoods, of the chamber, of all the other different groups that pre-exist on any specific issue. But most importantly, you have to be open to people coming up and talking to you, to be approachable, to be someone that they can respond to, whether it's through social media or in direct face-to-face. I got used to just being stopped wherever I went because people had questions and they knew I was somebody who wouldn't get my back up, who I'd like to listen to them, and I wanted to hear it. It's got to be, you have to be open to it, you have to be aware of it, and you have to constantly fight it because people have lives to live. And it's difficult to engage them, and it's not their fault, it's not our fault, it's just the nature. That's why we have representative government. So you have to actively pursue it. Thank you.
Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah, for me, I think kind of two simple answers is kind of let's enter the digital age, and kind of be point one, and point two is like kind of then kind of look at this situation. Why only 30 people? Well, there are only 30 seats. So I mean, one of the things we got to kind of question is how we are approaching this kind of matter kind of in the first place. And I think one of the things that we have had an excellent experience with, 14 applications for this position, 12 people kind of serving on an advisory committee, and we're kind of questioning kind of the vitality of this kind of community. I kind of raised questions about that. So one of the questions I would have is, what is the commission planning to do to be able to kind of reach out to Caleb Stevens and Ken Easthouse, who I think probably are two rising leaders in this community? The point here is that simply we already have a whole lot of networks in place. Do we do things in a proactive way to reach out to them? How many advisory boards are in this city? How often are they brought together, not as a group collectively, physically, but digitally to kind of seek their input? I mean, the people are there, they already have stepped forward, and we're not making kind of full use of them. Obviously, one of the points I'm trying to make is how do we reach out with kind of social media? Appreciate kind of, Terry, I hadn't realized that Lawrence Listens kind of may have been kind of thought kind of that you had as well. I mean, how do we ensure that we're able to kind of get more traffic onto a place like that? And one of the ways it might have to be is to get those networks that we already have connected with Lawrence Listens and start trying to figure out how to be able to move simply kind of out of the physical place we have and into the digital world where a lot of the people that we're looking to have take over our positions are going to have to likely be using. Another thing is on a real simple level, this is sent out via a whole lot of different feeds. What is it that the commission does to then reach out and ask them to contribute back? Or are we, again, operating within the context of a Web 1.0 of give information out rather than Web 2.0 of how to figure out of how to use the Twitter feeds, how to use kind of the online streaming, how to be able to take advantage of the tools that are there to better engage the people in the community.
Thank you. Mr. Shine.
I used to think it was an advantage to go last. I think it's a disadvantage to go last on this question. I'd say ditto to everything I've heard. My own experience on the commission was we do budget discussions and talk about raising taxes or this project or that project, and we get 3 people in the room, and nobody had a comment. Sometimes I think there's too much information. we can have city commission meetings in different locations, we can have all kinds of Twitter feeds and social media events and so forth and so on, but I think the truth of the matter is that people do listen. People do know what's going on. There are only 93,000 people in town. This is not New York City. I think the last election showed that when people care about an issue and they're involved in that issue, they do turn out and they do raise their voice and they do make their thoughts known. I mean, the election is in fact the opportunity for the public to demonstrate its involvement and its interests. So the old adage of you always get what you always got if you always do what you always did probably fits here. If we don't change anything the way the commission does it, we'll probably only get the 30 people in the room. I think there are 31 chairs, not 30. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is, you're never going to get 300 people in this room to talk about a land plan decision, which is much of what the commission does. They'll be here if it's an issue that gets their attention. $28 million police station or a Rock Chalk Park. Those are issues that are visceral and that get people involved. Now, I'm very much in favor of anybody who has a comment they want to address to me as a commissioner. I want to hear what they have to say. I want them to come to meetings and continue to involve themselves. But I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we're ever going to get 100 people or 300 people to come to a discussion about land plan decisions.
Okay, the next question will be for Dr. Reardon. The City Commission has set priorities and goals. How will you assist the Commission in being able to meet its goals?
Well, the first thing I did was I went to what those goals were. Public safety, mental health, infrastructure, non-motorized transportation, affordable housing, economic development. Those are great. I couldn't agree with them more. I think they're at the heart of what we do as a city. It also plays into what I do every day, which is help children. There's a national study called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Events. And it's a very important bit of information because it tells you that if you have 3 or 4 adverse childhood events, you're not going to be a productive citizen. You're not going to be helped. There's not too much we can do, but there are things we can do to prevent that. Affordable housing can help that, because one of the adverse events is not being homeless. Another is nurturing parenting skills. Well, if you're employed and you have money, then you can be much more nurturing than if you're unemployed. Creating situations where you have economic development, affordable housing, infrastructure, and mental health, because if you have mental health problems, those are things that create difficulties. One of my biggest disappointments after losing the election or coming in fourth was I spent 2 years gaining skills, and those skills, as a commissioner, I didn't get to use as much as I would like. I learned how to help and grow the city and make it go forward, how a good commissioner works with a good commission. Compromise is something that you have to do, but you have to compromise. If both parties think they didn't do very well, then you probably got a pretty good deal. And never lose your sight of your goals. Does it help the citizens of Lawrence? Are we a better city because of this change? Did I listen to the input from the citizens? Can we afford to do it? Those are the ways that I would help.
I'm going to use an example of how I ran my business when we were going through the goal process, or just the daily, weekly way we operated. So as with any business, it is vital that we would stay focused on our goals. We did this by following a very stringent process to meet these goals. One of our processes included weekly discussions with managers about our short-term goals as well as our longer-term goals. We started each and every week, every single Monday of the year at 6 a.m. We had a meeting that included myself, my field services managers, and my director of operations. During this meeting, we would discuss the week's projects, the field employees' issues, and short and long-term issues with equipment. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan to ensure our field crew had a successful week. At 6:30 a.m., our field services manager would meet with his field crew and begin loading equipment and supplies for the week. At the same time, our director of operations would prepare for our financial meeting. At about 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning, our director of operations and myself would have a financial meeting. This meeting included a review of our current profit and loss sheet, our receivables, our payable, our cash flow, labor, and overtime hours. We had a key set of indicators that we looked at each week to ensure the short and long-term viability of our company. In addition, we would discuss, among other things, our long-term goals, such as adding to our core products to increase revenue, the need to replace equipment, and maintaining and growing the business. By the end of our Monday morning meetings, we had a solid plan to ensure our week was successful and to ensure our long-term goals were on track. To meet the broadly stated goals of this commission, it is vital that we develop a process and crystallize our goals so that each piece can be tracked and successfully implemented. My business practices would allow me to bring this process-oriented approach to the commission discussion of their stated goals. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan.
When I looked at the 6 goals that you have up on your site, I mean, they are very good goals. They are very basic. They are very broad. It's essentially a mission statement. We want to have a good government. And I think that's good. What I don't know, of course, is how you break that down into the priorities and how you get the stated specifics into it. And I think that's an important part of how I can help implement those goals. One thing I do bring to the table is, having been a senior staff person for a U.S. Senator and for the governor, is I understand the difference between the role of senior staff and the person who sits up here as an elected official. And I think that's an important distinction, because it is incumbent upon the commission to set the goals, to set the priorities, and then you work with staff who implements it. And then you work together to have regular updates. You have these broad, really good goals, which you need, and I think you have that nice sheet that you update, I think, on a regular basis that's on the agenda that can show all the many things you're doing under each goal. But what we would do on the school board was, you'd have your stated goals of, wanting to educate all children no matter what their situation. I think they worded it better than that. But then you would have, the board would set priorities for that year, for the next year, in terms of things that you could actually measure and you could see where you were getting. The biggest thing you did, though, was you remembered those goals, those priorities, when it came budget time, because your money needs to follow your priorities. That's what the big power you have, is the power of the purse. And you set your goals, and then you implement them largely, through staff, but also then through the budget. If your money's not following your priorities, you've got an issue, you've got a disconnect. And so I think the understanding of how that works, how staff works, how elected people work, and then the importance of the budget process is a big thing I can do to help the board or commission implement their goals.
Mr. O'Brien.
Let me first kind of address 2 specific examples and then maybe kind of speak a little bit more broadly. I think I kind of bring a wealth of experience and skills in working extensively with the Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice before I came here to Kansas, as well as kind of the Virginia Department of Correctional Education, a host of juvenile probation officers throughout the state, and I've also had experience in working with school resource officers, court officials, and attorneys, so I might prove helpful in working with the police department with their ongoing education campaign about the proposed police station. And I also realize that the city attorney's office has expressed interest in mental health courts. And in the prior position I had, I worked with juvenile court officials on creating diversion programs for first-time juvenile offenders, so I'm quite familiar with alternative means of justice like a mental health court. And I recognize the work undertaken by Justice Matters and the Commission's connections to that organization, partnering to address the needs of those with mental health issues and matters about affordable housing is an important way, I think, for the Commission to approach shared community concerns. And so, having served on state, local, national boards of nonprofit organizations, and having directed one myself, I'm quite familiar with the importance of partnerships. And finally, I've worked with local, state, and national groups in matters as diverse as long-range planning, fundraising, professional development, and program development, implementation, and evaluation. And while I realize that there might be some that have concern about my experience, let me just say that my work has been directly connected to working with local and state governments for quite a number of years. And also, in case of kind of a learning about my kind of a learning curve, and Scott may appreciate this, my first teaching job I interviewed on a Monday afternoon. On a Wednesday morning, I found myself in a classroom with 4 separate preparations in 7th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade, so just go. My last job that I had before coming here, basically I took a job that was completely grant funded, and 9 months later I had to kind of turn in a grant proposal, which I had never done before, and had to have those 9 months in order to be able to prove that I was running a project that was worth funding, while at the same time traveling in a car from a state that's as west as Detroit, Michigan, to the Atlantic Ocean. Thank you.
Mr. Schoner.
Great goals, great information, poor long-term planning, I believe, are the hallmarks of this commission, its predecessors, the commission I sat on from 2003 until 2007. And I do share something with Terry Reardon. I came in fourth also. The missing piece for all the goals, all great goals, is that we don't plan for how to achieve them. There's so much information every week to deal with that we get lost in the minutia rather than the broad policy decision-making that will help us achieve the goals. If you're just focused on this week's work, this week's goal, this week's agenda, you'll never achieve the goal. So rather than breaking down these goals into separate components, I think it's important to look at them as all interrelated one with the other. You can't have affordable housing and a living wage if you don't have good jobs. You can't have public safety if you don't have good neighborhoods where people want to live and you have good public safety in those neighborhoods. Every one of your goals are connected with one another, and it's I believe, incumbent on the policy-making body to figure out how those goals will be achieved in a step-by-step sort of basis. Otherwise, the first year you're on the commission is over. Then you're into the second year, and that's going to go very quickly, especially if you're on a 2-year term, you're going to run for re-election. It's really challenging to impose upon staff the need to keep you focused on achieving the goals in a step-by-step, achievable, continuing to check on progress approach. And that would be my challenge to the commission.
Thank you for that perfect lead-in.
You're welcome.
I'd offer up my background. I want to give an example. We had the chairman of a publicly traded company. He was responsible to tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of shareholders. And the goal was to provide them a better rate of return at the bottom line. It was very simple. Thousands of options existed to drive the bottom line. They all started at the top line with new ideas on ways to do new things. The board of the company's idea, in collaboration with a leader, was to open stores internationally. I had the great fortune of being in a situation where the question came to my group to say, if you could pick any country in the world, Carl, which country would you open new stores in? We spent about $50,000 of outside money to answer that question. And the answer came back, let's do Canada, because it's close, it shares values, and they speak English. And the board of directors said, that's great. So that was one step in a specific goal to get to a specific place, okay? Now the next step was, well, what do we do now? And so the board gave us $500,000. And they said, how do we do Canada? And we hired attorneys, and we hired lobbyists, and we studied the legislation, we studied consumer protection, we studied labor law, we studied the differences in the culture that were represented in Canada. And those differences are huge. I'm so glad we picked an English-speaking country. Just the French part, Quebec is the French part, and just understanding the differences between the English-speaking and the Quebec was impossible. I offer up my skills to summarize those types of things. I've been through that kind of detail. I think I can help guide the staff of the city in developing the same type of decision processes to support the exciting future that Lawrence has if we're given proper leadership and we do the right activities.
Okay, Commissioner Boley, and your question will go to Ms. Larson.
What do you think a commissioner can do to encourage constructive conversations on controversial issues?
I think the initial thing we should do is build trust through transparency of the process. We need to pay close attention to citizens' feedback on the process and incorporate citizens' ideas when it's warranted. We need to find a bigger space for discussion of controversial issues. This would signal that the Commission expects and wants to hear more voices. And I would also model constructive participation. I would be thoughtful in Commissioners' remarks and thorough in the research and assure that citizens have access to all the information on which to base their opinions. An example of this is some citizens felt that they did not have access to sufficient information regarding options for the Lawrence Police Department. The old adage on this is that a confused customer never buys. It is so true in this situation.
Morgan.
I think there are two directions you can go with this question. One is the constructive conversations within the commission itself, and I think that's an important level of constructive conversations. You achieve that by respecting each other, listening to each other, coming prepared to the meetings. And the big thing is never questioning the motives of someone who disagrees with you up there. Because you want conversations. You are not going to agree on everything, but you want to be able to know that that person respects you, you respect them, and you're going to listen to them. And that's how you have one at the commission level. The other one, trying to have it with the community at large, has always been a challenge for every elected body in terms of how to get out there and get the best kind of interaction. I did this for years at the school board. We had many controversial issues. Some things worked, some things didn't. You can have lots of forums, and you should, but those really aren't conversations. Those are listening to people typically who are pretty angry. There's value in that, both for them and for the board to hear these things. The thing that worked the best for us, I thought, in all the years that we did it, was when one of the controversial issues was moving ninth graders to the senior high school and sixth graders into a new middle school format. The ninth grade to senior high was an issue that fermented for years here and had a lot of animosity of people that were concerned about that. We were the last district in the state to make that move. What we did that worked well was we invited people into each of the then junior highs. We set the community itself around the table. We had board members and staff people at each table. But the conversation was not just them with us, it was the community with each other. We learned a lot of valuable information back from that on those and what people were concerned about, where there issues that we needed to address. And they learned a lot about the nature of this community and the fact there are a lot of differences of opinions out there, and the fact that all of your friends agree with you doesn't mean that's all the board or the commission is hearing. So that's the way that I thought worked the best. And the other way is back to the answer of how do you engage 93,000. You've got to be approachable. You've got to be willing to respond to people, to their emails, and I think that's how that works out.
Mr. O'Brien?
Thank you. Now, Stuart, I might recommend a radical approach, and that would be to have one of you resign, kind of what precipitated this series of kind of public discussions, because I think that this has kind of resulted in, I think, a really healthy public deliberation about the city and the future of the city commission. So I applaud the effort of what the commission has done to try and bring silk out of a sow's ear. So first, I'd recognize how deliberation about controversial issues is not simply healthy, but is essential to city governance. I think typically controversy arises out of a disagreement over two or more good principles. So we need to always keep that in mind, is that oftentimes what happens is that you're not going to have people argue against kind of reasoned economic growth or argue against kind of environmental sustainability. It's when all of a sudden that those two begin to kind of come at each other, that we then all of a sudden run into some difficulties. So given that, sometimes what we also need to remember is to acknowledge and appreciate how each person places different values on those principles. And so while acknowledging differences of opinion, those involved must appreciate also the importance of compromise. While seemingly an obvious matter, I realize that compromise at times means seemingly giving in a little bit on your principles, which is not always a comfortable thing to be able to do, but I also realize that at times that some matters, though, get caught up in an issue that even teasing out all the principles that are involved, again, alluding to the police station, sometimes might make this difficult, and which might be an important task for the commission, is to kind of help set the stage for some of those debates. Finally, I think that an important piece is that we ought to take the constructive conversations a step further to purposeful deliberation, one where there's a fairly well-defined kind of process, one intended to be able to kind of reach an agreement, whereas the discussions are a critical first step, but they are just that, a first step. And again, closing kind of where I started, I think the process that the commission has set up to make the replacement for the vacancy illustrates the value of such a process.
Commissioner Sean.
If I'd been sitting on the commission when he made his opening comment, I'm not sure who he would have been looking at for resignation. I think all the conversation's constructive. The fact that, in fact, in my experience on the commission, Mayor Amix and I had a number of times when we disagreed about things. But it didn't mean it wasn't constructive conversation. And I think, frankly, we modeled constructive conversation. We modeled the ability to disagree with one another, and I'll walk by his barbershop in the morning and still say, "Hi, Mike, how are you?" I think modeling as a commissioner the way you conduct yourself in a meeting is a good first step. I'm frankly proud of the community because all of the conversation about Rock Chalk, about the police station, about the arts funding, all of that, in my mind, has been constructive conversation. If the inference in the question is that some of the conversation has not been constructive, I would dispute that. Because people do have strong feelings. People do care. I think Lawrence is doggone blessed to have to deal with these difficult issues about how to build a police station we need, or how to build a Rock Chalk facility that the community might want, or how to deal with spending a fair amount of money on a project out of guest taxes. So I guess I'm a little challenged by the inference that the conversation's not constructive. I believe the more conversation, the better. I believe this community has a history of interest in the events of this body and have always demonstrated a willingness to have a constructive, open, honest, blunt conversation expressing their opinions.
Mr. Watson.
A central part of this is how do we bring the government to the people? I feel like many times we've got a government that's on 6th Street. I'm encouraged. I've seen several of the current commissioners out, helping with the trash crews and being with the people doing the work. And I see over and over you're out in the community in different activities. I think that's the first step, and I think that's something we already do. Now, how does the communication process work amongst the commissioners? I would like to see a more strategic focus where the commission sets the vision rather than making daily decisions on which budgets are going to be used for what activities. And I realize when I say that, it's a big distinction, and you don't do either one of those. But what I'd like to emphasize is there's a vision that I've worked with where the staff of the city can provide much more effective information. In the last meeting last week, there was a great chart that the finance director presented on where we're at. As a small business owner, that's the first thing I look at. And I like to hear Lisa say that Monday morning I'm trying to figure out where I am. I look at the city, I can't figure out where I am. And when I see conversations about how we're going to spend $20,000 to $40,000 on a very worthwhile activity in Lawrence that consumes the commission's time, I'm frustrated. You're very important people. You have great opinions. We need a structure and an organization that supports those conversations. Now, I'm not going to get to the second part of this. The second part of this that's even more important. How do you have these conversations with the community? Again, we've got 93,000 people. We need some real expertise here that can help us build communication models that encourage participation. Thank you.
Dr. Reardon.
This is a difficult area, and one that I learned a lot on my 2 years while I was on the City Commission. And the first thing I found is that you really need to listen. You need to listen to the other city commissioners, what they say and why they say it. You need to listen to the public and the staff. But you need to ask questions. Questions like, does this meet the goal of the city? You need to respect alternative opinions. I can remember as ONA president, we were working with KU, and they wanted to build a scholarship hall where they kept creeping into our neighborhood and in the process destroying parts of the neighborhood, and we had demolition by neglect. And we would go in, and I learned then, it's something very important, that when you go in a controversial area, you respect the people that you're working with, even though you disagree with them. And we would go in and we would argue and we would come out and we would talk and we would laugh and we would talk to each other. That's how you show respect. You don't keep score. It's not about who you are. It's about what you do. And if what you're doing is meeting the goals of the city, you're okay. I said very early in the beginning that I would challenge statements that were made and challenge things if I disagreed with them. And it was not in a controversial way, but it was in a way that I thought was important because we needed to bring certain things out. You need to respect opposite thoughts because many of them are well-founded, but they need to be explained. I found in my office and I found in reality that you need to ask questions why people think what they think. What are the basis of their thoughts? I think the other parts that we can do, once again, is go to other cities and see what they do and see how they handle controversial issues and see what their resolutions are. But mainly, I think we need to ask questions. We need to have people explain themselves. And by asking questions, I find that a very effective method of learning.
Thank you.
My hand hurts.
Okay, the next question, we'll start with Mr. Morgan and from Vice Mayor Soderman.
Oh, wait a second. Let my hand rest, too.
They need a drink apparently before I speak.
We're just modeling the
Yeah,
ability
right.
to disagree.
Oh, I see. Very good.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
What constitutes a desirable, healthy neighborhood that you would wish to live in?
I think neighborhoods are a lot like people in this situation, where desirable and healthy can mean different things to different people. Certainly on desirable, that means a lot of different things. Healthy, you have a range of things that it can mean, from a marathon runner to an older person who can walk 6 blocks a day and is great for their age. All that being said, is what I'm trying to get at is that one of the beauties of Lawrence is that we respect that the people like different things and like to live their lives differently. And I live my life and you live your life, and we don't insist that all be the same. And I think that's important to keep in mind, and that's why this community, and one of the many things that makes this community great, is the differences in neighborhoods. That being said, I have had the privilege of being part of 2 communities, 2 neighborhoods in my time here. The home I've lived in since we moved back in 1988 is one very different kind of neighborhood, and then the one where I had my office from 1994 to 2007 on East 9th Street. 2 very different places, 2 very great places, but it was great having the opportunity to every day be in both of those worlds and realize that there are common denominators as to what people want. We want to have different feelings to neighborhoods, but we want great sidewalks, we want great infrastructure, we want lights that work, We want safe roads. We want pedestrians to be able to cross the road, kids to get to school. Those were common denominators that you find throughout the community. And I think it's incumbent on the city to recognize there's the common areas and there's distinctions. And when we're implementing policy, when we're making decisions, we need to respect those differences and realize something might work here, but it's not going to work over here. And if you do it all as one blanket and we all need to live the same way, that's not going to fly in Lawrence. And so I think the differences are awesome, but we need to understand those similar areas where we work on the basic infrastructure and make them work in all neighborhoods.
Mr. O'Brien.
Leslie, I really liked your question. I took it kind of very personally because it took me back kind of over 20 years ago as I confronted a situation of whether to kind of remain in Lawrence with my 11-year-old son after only being here for about 15 months or to return to Virginia to be near family and friends. And 5 years later, when I decided to move from the 1100 block of Vermont across from South Park to a neighborhood with more children. And initially I was attracted to Lawrence because of the open, friendly nature of the people, the diversity of public spaces for people to gather. I was impressed with how the elementary schools were not simply the academic, but also kind of the social heart of many neighborhoods. While living on Vermont Street, I was fortunate to have unbelievably supportive neighbors that helped me through a very difficult time, which I think kind of is another key aspect of a neighborhood for me. When considering other places to live in Lawrence, I was fortunate to find a place with a nearby cul-de-sac, which served as a safe gathering place for children, as well as an outdoor space for many outdoor parties that about 15, 20 different families have several times a year. And over the years, this gathering of people, which Mr. Herbert might appreciate, has gravitated to Facebook so that we are able to keep our connections going, in between the parties. And a hallmark of such neighborhoods is I think that people are committed to each other's well-being and rally behind each other in time of need. And I think I also benefit from the fact that I live kind of in a mixed-use area, so that I have an apartment complex that's about a block and a half away where a good friend lives, and also near several retail stores, where just the other day I kind of ran into someone who came up to me and introduced himself as the father of one of my students. And so I think obviously, as Scott said, the recent citizen survey shows a good barometer of what people desire, but I do think we need to kind of keep in mind that how the community efforts, things that we undertake as a community, that at times they do not come at the expense of neighborhoods. So it's a corresponding challenge, particularly as people work outside of this, more work outside of the city, the population grows and the boundaries expand, is how do we maintain these qualities of openness, friendliness, commitment to one another, and willingness to help. Thank you.
There's sort of an irony in this question, and that is that the goals the City Commission set of public safety, mental health, infrastructure, non-motorized transportation, and affordable housing dovetail beautifully into the question of what kind of a neighborhood do you want to live in. You want to live in a neighborhood that has all those things. You want to live in a safe neighborhood. You want to live in a neighborhood where people have a reasonably good quality of mental health. You want an appropriate infrastructure. You want good sidewalks. You want safe. You want a street that functions. You want a sewer system that functions. You want basic civic services that work. You want a good sidewalk. You want a sidewalk that's not broken. You want a sidewalk that allows you to stand in front of your house and talk to your neighbor. Whether you have a cul-de-sac or a sidewalk, you want a place you can go outside and feel safe. You also want this, I thought when I was thinking about the answer to this question, you want, a number of our neighborhoods on the east side of town are so overgrown with trees in the public right-of-way that have not been maintained by the city. I believe that a safe neighborhood is also a well-lighted neighborhood. You can't have a particularly well-lighted neighborhood if the trees are blocking out a significant amount of the available night illumination. In short, you want a neighborhood where people feel that they can go outside, have a conversation with their neighbor. Maybe it's in a cul-de-sac, maybe it's on the front stoop, maybe it's on the sidewalk. And I think we want to revisit the notion of community policing. This was a conversation 7 or 8 or 9 years ago. Part of that safety feature is, can you have police on beats where the police know the people who live in the neighborhood and the people in the neighborhood know the police? that adds a significant element of public safety and the sense of security in that neighborhood that can make that a place where you feel safe to live there and have your children play outside.
My excitement with Lawrence is diversity, and I think the government, whatever they can do here to preserve that diversity, is a central role. I grew up in a small rural town. The county averaged 2 people per square mile. We had lots of open space, we had lots of wildlife, we had lots of freedom. What we didn't have was a lot of diversity. We all worked hard, we all stayed and worked when harvest was due. We all stayed and worked when the crops needed to be planted. Most of us knew how to drive when we were 9 or 10 years old, not because we were licensed, but because we had to. I like that. I like the results. I like the way I grew up. Then I got to college. I fell in love with the woman that I love, who's a first-generation American, who spent her high school years not at Lawrence High, but in Kinshasa, which was in the middle of civil war in Africa, where her daily gun bursts were part of her school routine. She changed my entire life. That diversity expanded my sights and encouraged me to seek more. When we moved to Lawrence, Kansas, the neighborhood differences are striking. And that's what I like. I like my friends that work for big companies. They've got interesting ideas, but they're missing some things. I like the arts district over here. I like the thought that this city can support a corridor that some way connects downtown in a way that respects a very important neighborhood's privacy, and I hope we can do that, and connects it to investments that the city has already made in housing and professional development in the east side of town. Thank you.
Dr. Reardon.
This is an interesting question from a guy that lives on Tennessee Street next to a fraternity, and I had a discussion with the president yesterday. So it was very constructive and very cordial. I think one of the things we need to realize is that different parts of the city might have some differences in what their needs are in neighborhoods. I think that's an important concept. But they all have the same basic needs. Those basic needs are a safe infrastructure for adults and children that encourages walking, complete streets, safe sidewalks, community areas that encourage visiting neighbors. You know, if you go east of town on Delaware, there's a very nice project over there called Delaware Commons, where they have a common area where they all meet. Because really what we grow as a city is because of relationships. Those relationships are important, so we need to foster those. We need to be able to walk to school. We need to be able to ride to school. We need to create streets and safety so we can do that. What happens as you walk to school? You meet your neighbor. You find out that they're sick. You see something in the yard that's not cut, so you need to say, what's going on with my neighbor? Those are important things. You really emphasize the neighborhood associations. As a president of one that we had a controversial situation, I found it very important to get a small group of people together, get that information out to others, and you can do a lot. Safety from crime, strong police, strong department for the fire department. Public transportation is incredibly important in certain parts of the city, in many parts of the city. Continue CDBG grants with judicious use of these so we help the people that need the best of helping. And one last thing is a change in concept of the National Revitalization Act and use it more for small homes, for revitalizing. We have a problem with rentals, and we can help solve that problem if we use NRAs. Thank you.
You know, Leslie, when I was writing this, the answers or developing my answer for this question, I realized that I actually described my own neighborhood. I really believe I live in the perfect neighborhood in Lawrence, the most perfect neighborhood in Lawrence. And what I believe that to be is, to start with, is a well-funded public neighborhood school. I live in the Hillcrest neighborhood. Hillcrest is my neighborhood school. And my school was targeted for closure several years ago, and it was a very, very concerning time for my neighbors and as well as myself. So it's important to the future of our neighborhood that our school will be there, because to me, a school means that your neighborhood has a future, and that essentially there is another generation to come along. The other item that I find desirable is that our neighborhood is secure and safe, that we have easy access to police and fire services. I live at 1117 Avalon Road, and right now that entire road has been under construction for all summer, since June, and they are upgrading all of our water lines. They are adding fire hydrants, and the reason they're upgrading everything is because they want to bring everything up to fire code, which makes me feel very secure. I also believe in face-to-face relations with the neighbors as well as police, so that we're more responsive to each other's needs. And I think we need to trust in the predictable zoning and tax code. Property values will be protected, and residents, especially those on fixed and low incomes, will not be taxed out of home ownership. And I believe also that neighborhoods need to have a voice in their future. So that means a healthy neighborhood association where the collective voice can be heard and respected. I think this bows to the possible need to look at a different form of governing in Lawrence. An election based on precincts will more likely give neighborhoods an equal voice for their specific needs. I believe a good neighbor has a sense of community, it embraces diversity within the neighborhood, and that you know your neighbors, they know you, and you can watch out for each other's back, essentially a sense of reciprocity. Thank you.
Okay, this question will be from Mr. O'Brien, and Commissioner Herbert, it's all yours.
This is our lengthiest question of the night, so prepare yourself. Get comfortable.
Is my time started yet?
Yes, you will be out of time when we get to the end of the question. 2 weeks ago, the Lawrence City Commission was faced with the decision of whether or not to give the Lawrence Arts Center $100,000 in transient guest tax funds for the purpose of expanding the Free State Festival. 2 commissioners were in favor of full funding, and 2 were opposed. As the 5th member of the commission, you would have been the deciding vote to break that tie. Explain how you would have voted and why.
First, because unfortunately I was not at the meeting, I don't have the benefit of the insights offered by each of you regarding your thinking, because obviously if we're talking about this in kind of a constructive conversation way, some of my thinking may have been kind of influenced by matters that others might have brought up. So let me put my thoughts kind of in the context of what my thinking might have been prior to entering the meeting. So as someone that's fairly intimately involved with kind of initiating and building kind of programs that are fueled in part by kind of grant money, I'm aware that the purpose of the NEA funding was twofold. First, to enable the Arts Center to expand the festival from a small film festival to a multidisciplinary kind of community-wide one. But also, it was to serve as a seed money to allow the Arts Center to find private support to offset the future loss of the NEA funding. So I appreciated the figures that were reported in the request letter. I was surprised that there was no discussion of the more than 20% increase in the festival's budget from the prior year. I would have appreciated also an explanation of certain budget items, particularly ones that so dramatically varied from prior year. For example, what's the basis for expecting $60,000 generated by ticket sales in 2006 in light of how only $28,000 were generated in 2015? And I think the fact that the Arts Center only envisions generating about 10% more in private sponsorships suggests that future city funding not only is essential, but likely is to prove costly if projected future buses for the festival continue to grow at more than 20% per year. But that being said, I would have supported about a 10% increase in the city's funding for 2016, with future funding, though, contingent upon the Arts Center's ability to have raised at least that $143,000 from the private sector, and a demonstration of how future fundraising would better meet the rising costs of the festival. Simply put, I would ask the Arts Center to provide the Commission with a 3 to 5 year plan for the festival, which they'd be able to support with commitments, because I do believe the festival illustrates the dynamic nature of the arts community, and the ability of that community to undertake a regional festival, I think, is important for our city.
think this, the festival was essentially a poster child for what happens when you don't have long-term planning. Mayor Amix and I served as a committee of two to look at how a number of social service agencies would be funded. Every year, those agencies came to the commission and wanted additional money to fund their program, and they were all well-meaning proposals. But unless and until the commission says, we're going to have a long-term plan for how we're going to use guest tax money, we're going to have a long-term plan about how we're going to have land use decisions made, until we have a long-term plan about all the things which ultimately become decided on an ad hoc basis, we'll continue to have controversial issues like the funding for the festival consume the time and resources of the community and of staff. I can make a great argument for why $100,000 wasn't enough. They should have asked for more. I can make a great argument for why they should have asked for less than $60,000. But what I can't make an argument for is how the commission can go forward, this commission or any of its predecessors, without having some long-term planning about what the funding requests are likely to be. If there was a long-term plan, you'd have a matrix. How will you evaluate each of the proposals that come forward? How many dollars will it bring to the community? How many more people will stay in a hotel? How many more sales tax dollars will they spend? That planning is essential to helping the commission have a constructive decision and essentially have much of the groundwork laid before the matter comes before the city commission. In closing, I would have voted against the $100,000, kept it at 60, simply because there wasn't in place a better matrixed decision-making model that the commission could use for determining whether the additional money was warranted or not.
Can you repeat the question? No. Just kidding. Wow, where to start? Let me start with the answer. I would have voted no for two reasons. I couldn't tell whether there was enough money in the fund to pay for the project. I'd like to think that in the future that would be easier to understand. It's difficult for me to envision trying to make a $40,000 decision without basic information like, can I afford it? That's how I felt. That was my personal opinion. I think it's important to separate my personal opinions, especially in the role as a commissioner. The second thing that I would have said, and I would have voted no to, is that I wasn't able to identify what the benefits of that $40,000 were. As a small businessman, that's a decision, and I like to have results. Now I'm going to switch the question and tell you what I think, because I don't think the question gives this issue justice. I think this issue is really about who keeps the vision of our city and who takes us forward. From my point of view, this is my individual vision. I don't want to and I want to separate it from the communities. I'm new to this. My vision is, wow, we've got an opportunity to build on the values and the diversity of this community. We've got an art center that we've invested in, multi-millions of dollars, millions of dollars year after year, that's stepped up and brought a great program. Now, as a group, we tell them no, and that disappoints me. We've got to find a way for this community to come together, to have a vision, to support a program like that, that ties in with the art district, that further ties into East Lawrence. Thank you.
First thing I asked myself was, is this a good organization? You know, what's this organization about? And remembered that Ann Evans started this as an outlet for children, which affects me in a positive way. And this is a natural offshoot to help children and to help adults, but it's a slight variation what their initial function was. There's a nice article in the paper last week about this organization that helps shape our children and makes it more likely that they will be productive, happy adults. And once again, I go back to the ACEs study. So I think this is a valid and a good group and one that we should listen to carefully. I will give you my opinion as a citizen because you as commissioners have a lot more information than I did sitting back listening to all this. But I looked at it and said, does this satisfy our goals as a city? Does it or does it not? Does it improve the well-being of our citizens? Well, I think the ACEs tells us that it does. And all the children that have been there, my own and other children that I see in the office, say so. Is it open to all the citizens to enjoy? And I say yes. Is it being fiscally responsible? I don't know. I wasn't sure of that. I wasn't sure of the information, but I did think because this is a reputable, honest group, that a compromise was the best way to go. And I think a mixture of support was very reasonable. So sometimes you have to compromise. Sometimes you have to say, boy, I need money for other things. And you guys do need money for other things, so you can't meet all requirements. And I think to give them partial funding so that it can occur and let them go out and try to get the rest of it was the right thing to do.
First of all, Matt, on this issue, I watched it originally when it was aired, and I do have just a little side note for you, and that is I'm a Douglas County Master Gardener, and your comments regarding flowers, I love them. I have a long list of flowers I love, but I have to admit, mums are not one of them, so just so you know. You know, there's no doubt in my mind that the Free State Festival has the ability to be a national signature festival for Lawrence, and that the city should make every concerted effort to support it. But based on the information that was presented during the meeting, I would have supported the $60,000 vote, but not the $100,000 vote. The best option, obviously, would have been to fully fund the festival at the $100,000 level. However, to be a good steward of our taxpayer dollars, I have to ensure that every project that comes before the commission is treated equally and fairly. And as we all know, we do not have infinite resources. Trying to fund projects in the middle of a budget cycle complicates matters even more. We should not jeopardize our 2016 reserves. Thank you.
My answer I need to preface with the fact that I came in and sat out in the lobby halfway through the video that night, so I'm sure I missed some information. And there were some questions I would want to have had answered, some of which gets into the letter in terms of how you had a really good festival this year for $330,000. You were losing a $75,000 grant, and you were then increasing it to $400,000. I'm sure that you all got into that, but I needed better direction on why those numbers were the way they were. I also, and I say this as a supporter of the Arts Center, all three of my children are graduates of the, if that's what you call it, of the preschool there, albeit over at the Carnegie Building. But the nature of the letter was a little troubling in terms of the ultimatum, either you fund this or we're canceling the entire thing. And I was uncomfortable with that. Again, that's just based on what I was reading online before I came. And then that being said, of course, the vote was 3-1. It wasn't 2-2, so I'm not sure I would have been the deciding because it was clear. But I know the point. The point was 2 people supported the 100 and 2 supported the 60, and 1 was willing to go and to the 60 to make it 3-1. So there was some support for the festival. But when the mayor proposed, after everybody made clear there were 2 distinct camps there, that anyone interested in meeting in the middle, I'm not sure if that was a serious proposal or not, but when sitting here, that kind of jumped out at me as something that might have been considered, and I would have asked more about, because I was troubled by the fact it was out of budget. Every time you make a decision, you're making choices between different really good programs, and that's why it's important that it be in budget. You may have had to have a 1-year cycle where they kind of caught up because they need such a lead time to do what they're trying to do. So I was uncomfortable with it, but with my lack of knowledge sitting here watching it, that was something that jumped out at me as something that might have kind of bridged the gap and moved forward. But it is important that these things be done within budget whenever possible. I've learned that through the years in my on the board, because there are no really, really stupid ideas that just come up here begging for money. You're making choices. Thank you.
Okay. This question is for Mr. Shauna. I'm sorry? Okay. You're drying out, right? Okay. What single issue that this commission has decided did you disagree with? Why, and what would you have done differently if you were a commissioner?
Well, I'm tempted to say the selection process for the fifth commission. But I'm only tempted to say that. I'm not saying that. This commission's not been in office long enough to have faced multiple controversial decisions. In fact, perhaps the most controversial decision is the one I just mentioned. I suggest that the Art Center vote and discussion was probably the one that certainly greatest recency, but also is the one that seemed to generate the most public discussion, the most news coverage. And I want to go back to what I said in my earlier answer, and that is controversy is sort of the nature of the beast. But much of the controversy that the Commission faces when they make ad hoc decisions that are not decisions which are the product of more linear thinking about budgeting, about planning, about land use. I mean, land use is a particularly important one. Horizon 2020, actually, it looks more like Swiss cheese than anything else. It's been exempt. It's been wavered so many times in the past 25 years. But that particular decision is one I think I would have been more in line with saying, we don't have enough information about whether 40 is the right number, 60 is the right number, or 100 is the right number. You need to come back with better information to help us make an ad hoc decision. But I firmly believe that the greatest challenge for this commission or any of its predecessors or any of those that come after will be to try to figure out how to have more longitudinal planning, how to be thinking strategically rather than in an ad hoc fashion. I think when you do that, you take a lot of we have to make a decision tonight, tenseness out of the process, and I think you get better decisions.
Mr. Watson.
Well, Mayor Amix, I really appreciate this question. It goes to the heart of why I'm here tonight. 3 months ago, two or 3 months ago, a friend of mine asked me a question, I guess, that started my thought process that ultimately led to tonight. The person was different than I've dealt with often. I've got neighbors that think we spend too much and our property taxes are too high, and I have friends that think we should spend more. I talk with both of them and I listen to both of them and I understand both points of view. As a guy from a small town that works hard with a small business that's been in a big company, that lives in a diverse community, that has a first-generation American as a wife, I love those things. I love those differences, and I like to hear them. What my friend asked me that changed things was he said, our budget for this year is going up by $14 million. And I was struck by a couple things. One, surprise. But two, after my surprise left me, I was excited that we have a community that some way can support a $14 million increase to the budget. But that led to my next question. I'm a guy that's worked with budgets. I'm a guy that's used strategy and vision to allocate resources. I'm a guy that converses with the attorneys, with the specialists, with the subject matter experts to make sure that the money is allocated to the vision and the values of the organization. My concern when I think about that $14 million is after reading a 250-page budget repeatedly, I have difficulty understanding what the goals of this community are and how they're transmitted into a $14 million increase in an annual budget. Now, I'll also add, we've heard tonight, I'm very concerned long-range planning. If we need that kind of increase every year and we build it into our expenses, what does this community look like in 5 years? Thank you.
I have one comment before I start, and Carl, that must be a good friend if he started you in thinking to do this and he's still your friend. So, we'll find out in a minute. My thought is the bus system, because that was a controversial issue where different commissioners had different thoughts. I thought we needed to move on and make a decision and not to waffle and not to set it aside, because this is an important issue for a lot of people. And I think we need to create an environment in the city where the city commission says, this is such an important issue, we're going to make it a top priority and we're going to make a decision on this. And if I did that, I would say, ask these questions. Is it safe, the area that you want to go? And I think there were possibilities for that. Does it save gas? What is the, I heard and read information from the staff about where to put it and why to put it there and how much gas it would save and how much the environment it would save. We knew that. Should it be free land or not? Well, I think I found that free land is much better than land you pay $47,000 an acre. I learned that one. Is it a large enough footprint for buses to travel safely and easily? Does it minimize citizen problems who live nearby? Those were the issues that I thought were important. And then there is a commissioner, Stuart Bowley, who thought this should be as a destination. And I was interested in that. I wanted to know more about that. I would like to have asked him questions. Why is this so important to you? Why should it be important to the citizens? Do we really need a restroom there? How much would it have cost? I never heard that, to put it in. If it didn't cost much, let's put it in. If it costs a lot, and they're just there for a few minutes, and most people get on a bus, have used the restroom before, maybe that's not important. So once again, I'd like to look at goals. How do we readdress this issue? We should reevaluate it, make decisions based on what our knowledge is and what is the benefit for the city.
The one item that I would have done differently is to pull a change order for the Bertram Park River Trail System project. This was on the consent agenda, and I would ask that it be set aside for further review. It was voted on September 22nd, Commissioners' meeting. As a little bit of background, my company bids on approximately 150 projects per year, and sometimes we have to deal with change orders. We maintain a base of about 200 active projects that are in various stages of completion. Because change orders are sometimes a point of contention, it is very important to ensure the design is correct and the bid is clearly written to minimize the need for change orders. On this particular project, the original bid was spec'd out to include a mix of materials to balance trail, surface, durability, and cost. The staff report for the change order indicated that the change order is needed due to observe wet conditions in 2015. That concrete would provide a better long-range surfacing option. My concerns and questions regarding this change order are: how was this project spec'd out? Did the vendor or the city design the project? I ask this because this area of Lawrence is well known to be in a floodplain. Floodplains can be notoriously unstable and have many periods of dry and flooding conditions. The trail is being built between 15 and 25 feet of the largest river in Kansas. Were these facts taken into account during the design process? If so, what other information was used to determine that a mix of materials versus all concrete would be durable on this type of physical setting? The change order price increase is now more than the next low bidder that bid on the original contract. How would this change order impact their pricing? I realize that the contract has already been signed by the city, and these questions were likely addressed during the design and bid phase. For transparency purposes, it would be prudent to provide a full accounting of the process so citizens can trust the process and commissioners can make an informed decision. Now, I realize this is a small dollar amount in the big picture, but if we can't get these small things right, how can they expect us to get the big things right?
Mr. Morgan?
It's always tempting when you're facing the four voters that make up the electorate to tell you that all your decisions were wise and wonderful, but that might not be viewed as too sincere. I do agree that you don't have a wealth of decisions since April to choose from, and it makes sense given the nature of what everyone's been going through. The one thing that I focused on that I thought I would like to have been part of the discussion, and this is, again, based on my reading the tea leaves from what I wasn't at this meeting, so you all would know things that I didn't know, but it wasn't even at one of your commission meetings, but it was the study session on the police facility. And there seemed to be a split, as reported anyway, between all were supportive of some sort of moving forward with that. Two were pretty interested in moving directly forward with it, and two seemed to be wanting to take maybe a step back and try to have community involvement again. And I understood the frustration for the ardent supporters of that because there have been so many studies and so many things done over the 5 years. I mean, there is a wealth of information out there. I am very familiar with that frustration. I have been through many facility studies. You go through it time and time again, and then new people arrive, and you have to start over, and it gets frustrating. But I would have been part of the one wanting to take a step back, because what I've learned in Lawrence is sometimes the quickest route to what you're trying to achieve is not the most direct route. It is better to build community consensus, to step back and try. You don't need a lengthy process, particularly if you've done all the legwork already. It's down there. But you need to go to the community and be able to say, we heard your concerns, we've altered the plan to reflect those concerns, and we are going forward with Plan B. And I think the Plan B is how you often do things in Lawrence. It just takes a while, and people want to know that you listened to them and heard them. And I would love to have been part of that discussion. For one, I'd be giving you a more informed answer now because I know really what you guys had said. But the other would be that would be something that I think would be a good way to get moving on this. Because the goal is that facility, they need facilities. They are way overdue on that. So that's the one issue that jumped out.
Mr. O'Brien?
Michael Leslie's neighborhood question. Mike, I really appreciated this one, particularly kind of as Scott mentioned, it was kind of curious and kind of closing that you basically were almost kind of complimenting kind of Stuart's question about constructive conversations is, okay, stand up here and take a position that's going to be against one or more kind of the people you potentially might work with. Well, so at the risk of maybe ostracizing all of you and my veterinarian, I would have supported the requirement to include a sprinkler system in all new businesses that house pets during non-business hours. And would seriously, though, have considered a grandparent clause that would give existing businesses 2 to 3 years to install such a system. In such matters, I would have tended to lean toward the expert in this case, Fire Chief Bradford, who is, from what I understand, strongly recommended requiring the installation of such systems. In turn, I believe I would qualify the ordinance that might meet one of your concerns, Mike, and that only be for businesses that house or kennel pets that during the evenings when people were not present. That might not, therefore, have to be necessary for those places where you had people present. We're not kenneling people overnight. That would then include like groomers. One reason for the grandparent clause, though, is to learn the financial impact on the pet stores, pet groomers, pet kennels, and veterinarians of installing such systems. I certainly would not be adverse then to kind of revisiting the ordinance. A further study of the issue bears out the concern that the financial impact will result in the closure of the stores or clinics that then might help kind of address Matt's concern. At the same time, though, I am fully aware of what it took to get this issue on the Commission's agenda in the first place and would not want similar incidents to have to occur to put the matter in front of the Commission again. So while I appreciate the action taken by the Commission, I am aware how difficult it is for animals to respond to a fire alarm when people aren't there. Thank you.
Okay. So that concludes our questions from the Commission. The item on the agenda, the next item that we have available, is it the closing statements at this point?
Well, if there are any follow-up questions
Okay.
of the commission, we can do that.
Okay.
If you could please let the timekeeper know how long you're going to allow for each follow-up question. That'd be helpful.
Okay. I think follow-up questions again are 2 minutes. Does that work?
How many of these are you looking for, Mike? Do you need to go to work tomorrow, or?
I can be here all night, so anyway.
Well, I'll go easy.
I would suggest that we have 2 each. If we need to keep going, we'll keep going, okay? So, follow-up questions, they can be to the entire group. They can be to a specific candidate, whatever your pleasure may be. So who has a beginning follow-up question? Matthew.
I'd love to start.
Okay.
This question is specifically for Scott Morgan. Scott, on question number 4, and actually it's question 4 in my packet. I don't think it was actually question 4, so let me reread the question. It was, what constitutes desirable, healthy neighborhood that you wish to live in? You responded, we respect that people like to live their life differently. Let me first off tell you, I love that answer. That's terrific. But let me ask a follow-up to that and ask you to get more specific. With that in mind, in the short period of time in which we have been seated here, the 3 newbies here, if you will, we've dealt with several code enforcement issues. In fact, I would say we've dealt more with that than any other topic we've had since April. Some of these issues have involved individuals who have chosen an alternative lifestyle with their property, turning it into a community garden or whatever the case may be. In that you responded, we respect that people like to live their life differently. What would your view be on strict code enforcement?
I think the important thing is, if you need to modify the code, you should modify the code to allow people, if you have a belief that people should be able to do whatever they want with their home. I wasn't trying to say that. I know that there are some who would do that if it's consistent with the neighborhood and the whole neighborhood. Neighborhood is a living beast. I mean, it is not just one person. And that's the nature of choosing to, making the social contract, as a government teacher, of choosing to live within a community and within a sub-community, is that you choose to abide by certain standards and guidelines. It's a fine line that you have to judge, but I mean, if you have a code, you probably should enforce it. If you need to modify the code because it's too harsh, you should modify the code. That's why one of the things we spent a lot of time on the board trying to get policy through in what we were doing, because otherwise it was sort of ad hoc. Well, we like you, we don't like him, and you made decisions that way. And if you needed to change the policy, you would change the policy. If strict enforcement of it resulted in an inappropriate result. Now, you can be essentially a court of equity, I guess, and make changes in those, and if there's a strong reason. The bar becomes higher to make those adjustments if it's in a violation of the code. That doesn't mean that you adhere to it religiously and with some sort of Stalinistic approach. It does mean that you have to reach a higher bar as to why that is acceptable and in violation of the code, whether you need to change the code or not.
Thanks.
Sure.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a
Melissa?
question. This one's for Joe O'Brien. On the question, how do you interpret the results of the election last April? How will that influence your decisions as a commissioner? I took a lot of notes, as you know, and you got cut off at the end of what you were talking about, and you just started talking about downtown development, and you were saying that we need to build in, up, and out, New Hampshire Street, 6-story buildings. Developers offer big projects, new look to downtown, and then you got cut off. And I didn't know if you were going somewhere like that. Because it just kind of stops there.
I think the options that we have kind of as a community is building in, building up, and building out. And I think we need to kind of, I think all of us kind of recognize the importance kind of the long-range planning is we need to kind of figure out what would then kind of be kind of an appropriate balance among those. So obviously, it seems like either purposely or not, decisions been made relative to the downtown to build up. And so what are the long-term implications? And when I'm thinking of that, it's like kind of 10 to 20 years out is what could the downtown look like if ultimately we have a situation where it is largely kind of built up along a place kind of like on New Hampshire. Again, as I mentioned, as a developer, if I'm looking to do something downtown, my tendency might be to propose a large project if it would seem to be ultimately kind of more profitable, to my particular company kind of in the long run. So by providing those kind of tax incentives, therefore, are we then encouraging something? And if we are, then I think then it's appropriate to bring that matter to the public and saying, what we now have decided is a policy goal of where we'd like to go relative to the downtown. Let's make sure that the community is aware that that is a purposeful decision that's been made. Let's hold a discussion on it, which is something that you've been kind of talking about all evening long, is how to better involve the community. And then let's have the community make some decisions if that's the direction that we wish to go relative to the downtown. That would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I figured that was cut off, so thank you.
The question, this is going to be for multiple people. This will be for Mr. Shawner and Mr. Watson and Mr. Morgan. And the question has to do with public incentives and the relationship. Would you be willing as a commissioner to use public incentives to assist in the affordable housing question? David, you can go first.
Maybe. I wouldn't rule it out. I think affordable housing is a misunderstood term. Affordable housing, according to the Department of Labor, is housing that someone can pay no more than 30% of their income for the rent and the utilities. So the role of government in providing housing for folks whose wages permit no more than that expenditure and have safe, clean, livable housing as part and parcel of our living wage campaign and so forth, I think we should be looking at a housing trust approach. We have a growing homeless problem in this community. It's, I think, nationwide understood that it's cheaper to house people who have those issues than simply trying to put together a short-term community shelter approach, because we haven't really solved anything in the long term by just providing short-term overnight stays. We need to find a longer-term solution, and affordable housing tax incentives. By the way, you know, the Commission has only a limited number of tools, and tax policy is certainly one of them. And if tax policy can be used to promote an agenda which meets those goals of the Commission, and affordable housing is one of them you've adopted, we ought to look at that as an approach. I certainly wouldn't say absolutely not. I think it's worth a serious look.
Mr. Watson.
I'm going to repeat and repeat and repeat. If I know the vision, I can support it. I have a vision that looks something like we have a downtown convention center that supports professional groups that have broad differences of agendas, opinions, and ideas that can come to Lawrence, experience our diverse culture, enjoy it in a small environment, stay in our hotels, buy our products, and love downtown Massachusetts like I do. Then they walk down and they discover the 9th Street corridor that leads them to our beautiful arts center and a couple of new buildings that don't quite fit in. But it also leads them to potentially a quiet area that respects the neighborhood, that leads them further down to the investments that this board has already made in East Lawrence. And that affordable housing at the end of that trail, focused on artists and affordable living that supports the diversity of Lawrence, I can get excited about.
The short answer is yes. The one thing I would absolutely want to do if I were to get on the commission is I need to get a comfort level with what the policies really are for all the various incentives that are in the toolbox there and how they're utilized. I can't find necessarily the rhyme or reason, but I think there are useful tools if we understand what we're using them for and when we're not going to use them. And as far as for affordable housing, as I mentioned, that's part of the problem I have with the apartment complex across from the stadium and some of the other uses that we've used on the NRA is how that has nothing to do with affordable housing. And you look at the statute behind, I looked into, well, what is it that the NRA was supposed to accomplish? And I have trouble making that fit, and especially when our policy says 50%, you go to 85%. But that NRA is a great tool, but it has to be one that is welcomed by the people you want to, where you want to put it. And I think in those cities where they've had neighborhoods and they have buy-in to the neighborhood and you delineate the geographical boundaries for them, I think it could be a very useful tool to maintain. It doesn't get into Section 8 housing or that kind of thing, but it does help homeowners stay in their home and maintain the value of their home and maintain the value of your modest housing stock, which is so important for affordable housing. Again, being lots of different definitions from the technical on up to what people view as affordable. If you try to layer it in, and I'm talking about East 9th Street, if there's pushback from that community and they're worried about it hurting them, you're not helping them. And so I think that it's a tool that can be used. Other cities have done it, and I would be very much open to that. But I'd like to do it within the context of a review that I understood what our policy was on on incentives.
Other question? Matthew?
This one would be for Dr. Reardon. I think the one thing that differentiates you from the other 5 candidates you face this evening is that we've had the opportunity to have 5 months worth of forums together with a good number of us at this table. And I appreciate that, and I certainly respect the effort that you put into that campaign. My question for you would deal with question, I believe, was Commissioner Boley's question. What do you think a commissioner can do to encourage constructive conversations on controversial issues? I really liked your answer, first of all, but my specific follow-up question would be, I guess, to address the elephant in the room, and that is, given that we spent a good number of months going against one another at forums, campaigning heavily against each other, what assurance could you give this body that you could be a member of this team?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's one that I ask also. So before I even decided, and at that point I had not committed to putting in my name for the application to see if you would consider, I sat down and talked with a number of people, one of which was Mike Amix. And I said to Mike, I'm thinking about doing this, but I want to know if I would be a welcome addition or a tolerated addition to the City Commission, since we ran against each other. And I would have the same philosophy that I would have when I was on the Orion Neighborhood Association, and that is, you treat the people with respect. You might have different opinions, but you still value those opinions. And I don't think anything happened during the election that would change that in me. I think there are times where you get frustrated. I think there's times where you have differences, but there's not times where you hold it against people. And that's why I said you go on. You don't keep score. And I mentioned that earlier. When I was on the commission, we had a very divisive issue, which I'll call rental protection program. And that cost me, for a while, a friendship of somebody on the committee. But I thought that was important, and I pushed to have that issue decided. I know what I thought about it, and I thought we should get it done. Just like on the Planning Commission, when we came to a point where we needed to pass the 2006 reviews or not. We needed to change things, but if you change them and change them later and make them perfect. So it almost cost me that friendship, but because I respected him and he respected me over a period of time, we were fine. So my thought is respect who they are and what they think, and you can get along. And you can value a difference of opinion. We need a difference of opinion.
This question will be for Mr. Morgan, Ms. Larson, and Mr. Watson. There's a lot of discussion going on in Lawrence, Kansas right now about development in the downtown area, the blocks of downtown. And it seems like every project that's come forward has a public incentive package to it. Are you a supporter, can you explain, do you or do you not support the use of public incentives in our downtown district for new housing, new retail, whatever it may be? Mr. Morgan, you can go first.
I'm ready to talk. The answer's obvious. The 19-year-old that I talked with this morning said, why wouldn't we support turning that vacant lot next to the Eldridge Hotel into some type of attractive property? And doing that is not going to add any demand on our tax dollars for fire and police and road maintenance, and it's just, let's get something in. And if we can waive taxes and support that property to get something on Mass Street, again, I think it's as simple as my 19-year-old friend that's tired of looking at that clay. And I'd echo that with other properties downtown. Now, again, have I talked about the importance of vision tonight? I don't remember. Okay. Does it fit? I can't imagine having this beautiful, downtown convention center potentially across the street with a great part of downtown anchored by a beautiful, what do we spend on the library? $28 million. That's a hub for our public transportation that provides a gateway into the rest of downtown. Thank you.
I think many of the projects that have recently received incentives has gone way overboard. However, I do think there are projects that merit it. In the downtown area, I think that the Eldridge project, because it is a historical building, would merit that incentive. And however, I think that the amount given was 85%, which is above what is recommended in our economic development documents. So I think it went too far. I would also look at projects that merit and they provide a service. I think the grocery store issue could be a potential for that. I think that we would need to make sure that projects that are brought forth, that they are sustainable projects. Do they meet that 3-tier criteria? And is it balanced in that criteria? And if it can meet that 3-tier criteria and is socially acceptable, then I would back projects of that nature, but within the constraints of the guidelines that we have for economic development.
Initially, I would again emphasize that I would need an overall review and plan for how we are going to use incentives in general. I think that is critical to how we are going to handle this. I also need to mention it wasn't 28 million; it was 18 million. I love the library, but and that included included a garage too. I worked a lot on that bond issue. But with regard to downtown, the fact that we have to maintain that it is the jewel of our community, and we can't just say that so everybody thinks, oh, he likes downtown or whatever. You got to mean it. You've got to understand it and realize it is absolutely the heartbeat of what makes us Lawrence. And so you've got to figure out what your plan is for that, whether it's a convention center, and it's my understanding in 2020, although with the 50 amendments I'm getting a little lost, but I'm glad that it's being revised, and I think that's an important step to update it, is that downtown there was talk of the need to expand it into Vermont and New Hampshire. But if you have a plan and you want to implement it, I think that's great. But whether or not you need to provide incentives for that, I'm not convinced of the finances of that. I need to see the but-for test of whether or not these things wouldn't happen even without our financing. And we need to keep track of the ones that we already have in place and see how much does it cost us. And I understand that it doesn't actually cost us out of pocket, but it does cost us in terms of revenues down the way. And what we're doing with parking, is that included in if we're providing incentives? Are we making any kind of requirement for parking? I'm rambling a bit, but that's because I think the city's rambling a bit when it comes to incentives, and they seem to be fairly automatic at various amounts, and I'd like to get it back into a cohesive tool where we think, yeah, we are willing to do this if you do X, Y, and Z, But if you don't, we're not just going to give it to you because we really, really would like your building down here. I think there's a lot of interest in building down here with or without our incentives. So I'd like us to get a cohesive and logical plan, stick to it, and I would be very hesitant just to give it to buildings just along there that don't provide some other priority that we are trying to meet.
Can I beg one more question? I know I'm sorry. Yeah, well, Scott, I apologize if you come back to that. It's a test and exercise in stamina, really. This question was, what can we do as commissioners to ensure that Lawrence remains home to working people of modest means? I believe it was the first question addressed. And your response, I liked it, of course. I'm a public school teacher, and you opened your response by saying it all starts with good schools. Bless your heart for saying that. Now I got to put you on the hot seat for saying that.
I know there's always a but.
You were a member of the school board, I believe, the year before I was hired to Lawrence, and that school board is somewhat infamous in our community for having closed neighborhood schools. So going back to your question about the way to make sure that Lawrence remains home to people of modest means, and your first step is maintaining good schools, could you clarify your decision to close good schools?
Well, I guess I'm privileged that I'm infamous. That's a form of notoriety, I guess. You know, the nature of having actually been involved and actually doing things is that you do have a record, and you do have, in this town, a record of making difficult choices. I was on the school board for 8 years, spread over 12 years, and was president, cleverly, twice after large recessions, after the 9/11 recession and then after the 2007-2008 recession. And we had massive budget cuts, and we were deciding how to implement those cuts. And we were having to follow our priorities. That's what I was talking about when we were talking about budget goals. And we had to decide, was it teachers that we wanted to support, or was it buildings? We had 19 elementary schools when I started on the school board in 1999. One of them had about 35 people in it. 3 of the ones that I was involved in closing were legacies from the township school days before we had unification in the 60s. I don't think, the one thing I think I would point out is that no school board after I've left, and remember I lost re-election because when I was president first time I was involved in closing 3 schools. I'm Dr. Death when it comes to schools, and it's not a reputation I enjoy. I hate the whole thing, but it was choices that had to be made. They were tough decisions that had to be made, and I stand by them because no one has tried to reopen those schools. No one has gone in there and said we need to recreate these things. And I would argue that the very thing that I did was the compromise we reached on the task force when we did close one more elementary, but then we threw it back to the community, and they came up with a plan that put $92 million into neighborhood schools. And I would say that would not have happened if we had kept all 19 schools open. We were able to afford to recreate and re-anchor these schools because we had a serious discussion and handled it like adults. So I don't apologize for it. I think that that's what makes our neighborhood strong, is when leaders are not afraid to say, this is our choice. We don't have the ability to raise taxes on the school board. We have to find ways to spend our money wisely.
Thank
you. Okay.
You got it? You should.
I swear I'm done.
Thinking there ought to be one more. Not yet, not yet, not yet. No, I think we got it.
We're not doing the long division question we talked about.
I was going to ask who won the 85 series, but I think that's the Mets. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Thank you. So the next item.
The next item would be the closing statements. Each candidate gets 2 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to suggest at this point that we do the 2-minute closing, and then we are going to break about 20 minutes before we start the public comment section, okay? So, yeah. I'm trying to make friends, okay. So now I am messed up. Who did we leave off with? It would be
We left off with Mr. Shiner.
Okay.
So the next
So Mr. Watson. Mr. Watson, we'd like to have your closing statements for 2 minutes.
throughout this, I've really been the lucky guy on not getting that first question. So I guess it all comes back, doesn't it? It's pretty exciting for me to be included with a group like this. It's pretty exciting for me to talk with a group like you. I'd like to offer up that I could be a great addition to your team that Lawrence needs right now. We're faced with picking the next city manager. We haven't hardly talked about that. It's probably the biggest subject that we're going to address in the next few months. And again, I come back to vision. Who's going to be the keeper of the vision for Lawrence? Is it going to be a mayor? Is it going to be the commission? Is it going to be the city manager? I don't know. I wish I did. I watch potentially every day dozens of effective organizations. And the key thing at the very beginning is they all have a keeper. That's hard to follow, but let me be specific. Let's talk about the hospital that we have here in town and the great service that it provides to our public. It has a keeper of the vision, Gene Meyer. He has simple goals. It's a top 100 hospital. He communicates with the public. He has a communication plan. He even has a communication team that engages the public in healthy activities. They're ready to outreach through the rec center to build a facility to increase healthy living. I think those are all exciting examples, and I think they represent challenges to this board. And I'd like to reassure you that I'm a great team player with a strong financial background, a strong vision, and the ability to make strategic decisions that this community needs right now. And I appreciate the opportunity to express my opinions and talk about myself and to have you listen. Thank you.
Dr. Reardon.
I put my name forward for this consideration because I heard from many citizens who came up to me and said, you know, you have experience. That's something that we need. I didn't like hearing that, but I heard it. And I agreed with their thoughts. I also think the committee did a great job, and I commend Joe and the rest of his committee because I think they have really 6 good quality people here. And I think each of these 6 finalists during an election year would be great. But this is not an election year. Well, it actually is, but it's after the election. But it's not an election. We have a different need at this time. During the questions last Thursday, the subject came up when I was one of the 6 up here, and it said, why don't we have what KU has? Why isn't our fiber the same as good as the city? And I felt like a kid saying, I know the answer to that one, but I didn't get asked. And the answer is, we share fiber with them. They didn't know. The answer is, they finished the final mile. We haven't done the final mile with ours. We want that to be done by a group that does it professionally, not by the city and spend $5 or $6 million. It's important to know these things. You need somebody that comes up and knows the issues, and they've been recently here, and they don't have to come up to speed. I was on the commission for 2 years, and it took me a year to get up to speed. It took me another year to think about doing something, and then I was gone. Experience is important to me. The issues are known to me. There is no significant learning curve here. Therefore, good decisions, I think, can be made. I especially have experience in land use, being the chairman of the Planning Commission when we adopted all the Planning Commission process that we have now. I agree with the goals that we have for the city and with these commissioners. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the commissioners for the ability to participate in this really unique process. You know, and I'm humbled to find myself in such a good company. So as much as I would like for you to select me for this job, I will respect your decision, knowing that whoever you choose from this group will be an added asset to this governing body. However, I do believe you should choose me for the job, and here's why. I have 30 years of experience working within a governing system, first as a state employee and then as a business owner in a highly regulated field. I bring a unique technical skill that I think will benefit the Commission's collective discussions and decision-making. As in my business, I can fully appreciate the importance of the trust factor in a relationship between management, staff, and Commission. My business required that I cultivate the ability to hear and understand stakeholders' views and to respond to those very sensitively. I worked effectively with neighbors and businesses whose interests are sometimes in concert and sometimes in conflict. I have a strong background in state government that has helped me understand very complex regulations, contracts, and negotiations. My business had yearly revenues in the $1.6 to $1.8 million range and annual payroll of $600,000 to $700,000. I handled our finances as a fiscal conservative. I kept my business solvent, grew it thoughtfully and carefully, and operated within the business's means. I would approach the city budget exactly this way, as a good steward of taxpayer dollars. You know, it's a privilege to serve one's community, and if I'm selected, I will do the best for the citizens of Lawrence and my colleagues on the commission. And I will do so humbly and with gratitude. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this process and to be here. I will acknowledge that I've told more than a few people that I feel like I'm on a reality show, and every night I'm trying to decide if I get a rose and whether I should get excited. You have a difficult choice ahead of you. You have 6 very good candidates, and it's your job to figure out who's the right fit for you as a commission and who's the right fit for us as a community. And you have an important decision. You know that, but that it came home to me very strongly when I was going through the minutes and records trying to prepare for this evening, and I came across the minutes from April, your first meeting, and one of the commissioners had this quote: "We must all commit to working together in building trust with our community and also with each other. This year will be a year that will be dedicated to transparency, openness, and authenticity." Well, that commissioner, of course, is not here any longer, and in fact, he is the reason we all are here. Words are important, words matter, but what ultimately we are judged by who we are, what we've done, and what we do. My wife and I moved here in 1988. We raised our 3 children here. We have started a business in 1990 and spent 17 years building that business. I've worked at the federal level, I've worked at the state level, and I've worked at the local level, and I would say I've been vetted by the public arena for the last 25 years. I spent 8 years on a school board during some highly controversial times and had to make some really remarkable, tough choices, and that's where you learn what being on that side is like, is going through extended periods of getting people angry at you and realizing you have to have thick skin, you have to have a sense of humor, and you better not get your back up because these people have every right to be there and to be upset, and you need to engage them in that conversation and celebrate the fact that this community is as involved as it is. City government is complex, but what is really complex is this community. This community is hurting right now. We have lost our city manager, we have lost our mayor. I think the community is ready to get back to work, and I know this commission is ready to get back to governing, and I'd like to be part of that. Thank you.
Again, like all my colleagues, I greatly appreciate this opportunity to have spent this time with all of you and with members of the community. I come up here unprepared for any kind of final remarks because I believe you probably have enough information to be able to kind of make some judgments about us. But I do have 1 or 2 kind of closing comments. That largely is, I was impressed about 20 years ago when I stumbled across Horizon 2020 because I saw a plan for a future. I equally was impressed as I became re-involved in looking at that document for the update and seeing what was done kind of last spring. And I believe there already has been a lot of good effort put into trying to chart a long-range vision for this community. And I just regret that you as commissioners have had to deal with what you've had to deal with that have not enabled you to act on the good work of the community that helped to put that policy statement together. And I look forward to you all and whomever is fortunate enough to be chosen to help you figure out how best to be able to kind of act on the vision, that shared vision that we all have for our community. Thank you very much.
can't believe I get the last word. I was going to propose that we have 4-month terms. The 6 of us would each be able to serve a part of the remainder. And frankly, as I've listened to everybody, every time we get together, I am more impressed with the people that I'm listening to. I mean, it's a great group of folks. And I'm glad that I'm not going to have to make a decision. In fact, if I had a vote, I'm not sure who I'd vote for. I might not vote for me. But what I can tell you is that for the last 35 years, I've made decisions on a regular basis that affect the lives of about 40,000 people who teach in the state of Kansas. I've been the general counsel for the Kansas NEA for 35 years, make decisions on a daily basis which are complex and affect the lives and livelihoods and rights of all those individuals who teach all the kids in this state. I've also served for 4 years on the commission, and Dr. Reardon had it exactly right. The first year you're looking around going, now, how do I turn on the microphone? And the second year you're a bit more comfortable, and then if you're fortunate enough, you serve another year or 2. I don't think that this commission and this conversation has taken enough account of the value of the staff that does the work for this city. The city commission has the easy job. They get to make broad policy decisions that have to be implemented by the staff. It's important to have quality people making those policy decisions, but you need to have people on the commission who recognize that they're not the most important ingredient in this stew. They need to listen to the staff, listen to the public, and make an informed and independent decision. I believe I'm an independent decision a thinker, an analyst, and I've made my living for the past 35 years asking the hard questions. Thank you.
And thank you to all the candidates tonight to the effort, the thought, and you know, your answers coming from your heart. We really appreciate that. So, don't go away.
Nobody quit now.
Yeah. We are going to take a short break, 15, 20 minutes, and we'll come back. We will begin the public comments section of our meeting. And so get up, move around, stretch, and we'll be back in about 20 minutes, okay? Thank you. You bet.
This is 20 minutes. Is 20 minutes up?
Must have been running. No.
Okay.
There's something to that, you know?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin the next part of our meeting. The next item on the agenda is general public comment. Well, general public comment in about the matter that is at hand. And what I would like for you to do is, if you would love to get up and support your candidate of choice, you can talk about the process if you want. But I would appreciate that if we talk in positive tones about the folks that have come forward tonight, and I think that will work. You will be given 5 minutes. Hold on just a minute, Dan. Your comments will be limited to 5 minutes, and please sign in, and we will recognize you as you come forward. So, Dan, you are first.
Dan Dannenberg, 2702 University Drive. First of all, I'd just like to say this is a travesty. This meeting started at 5:45, and now it's 8:30, and we're just getting to the public comment. I mean, 8 questions? Are you kidding? We could have done this in probably half the time, even with this many candidates. You wonder why people don't want to get involved in government. This is a very good example. The person I would support out of these unqualified individuals is probably David Shawner, even though he's hobbled by the fact that he's an attorney. And I have to say a negative comment, and I have a right to do that. And my negative comment concerns Dr. Reardon. A few months ago, I came up here and ranted a complaint. Dr. Reardon, sitting in that chair right there, shouted me down. Now, he is not qualified to be a part of this arrangement we have here. We could talk about Rocky the dog, but we'll leave that one out. My father froze his behind and nearly lost his mind at the Battle of the Bulge. I have college classmates that got their lives ended in the jungles of Vietnam. No politician at the local level or any level has the right to tell me to shut up. I have a right to complain. And I don't think he is qualified. The other thing is, oh gosh, there are so many. I don't know where to start. I mean, this whole process is a failure. And the thing we need to do is make sure that when we get a new commissioner, that the commission becomes a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and not a government of developer landlords, by developer landlords, and for developer landlords. Because that's what we have now. My neighborhood is insecure because of the rental properties. Now, there have been some changes, but they're not enough. And we need to have a public utility regulation of rental properties in this city, because this doesn't work. And the staff doesn't work either, because they are part of the, what should I call them? The consigliere, the landlords, the developers, and their lawyers who are actually running the show. So I think we need to do something different about that, and I hope if Mr. Shawner is chosen that he will take that tack and do something about that. And by the way, Commissioner Herbert, the last time I saw that style of dress, George Raft was playing a mobster in a movie.
Sir, that was uncalled.
Yes, it was.
Sorry, Dr. Raft. Yeah.
My name is Frank Jansen in East Lawrence. I live a 5-minute walk from downtown. I think this event tonight was wonderful. I think the staff is doing a great job, and I think these guys are really qualified. Anyone would be qualified.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I simply have a point of order. The paper referred to tonight, you're going to choose either one or two. If you choose one, that sounds like it's it. But are you going to go 2 or 3, or can you explain exactly what you expect to do tonight? Choosing 1 or 2 or 3 or?
Keep going. I will explain that a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. Actually, what is going to happen, just so everybody knows, upon completion of public comment, there is going to be a ballot, if you will, presented to the commissioners, okay? They will vote for their top 3. Now, this is all public record, okay? We're going to have discussion in a little while, and we'll be naming who our top 3 are, okay? Just so everybody knows. Anybody who wants copies of these, you can request these through city manager's office, city attorney's office, and get all the copies you would like. But that's how it's going to work. We're going to each one of us will vote for 3. My goal would be through the discussions is that we refer 2 to next week's meeting, okay? 2 people, top 2 votes, okay? That's my recommendation. But don't go away, Frank. We will be discussing that, okay?
I'll stay around.
Thanks. David? How are you, sir?
I'm Dave Ambler. I live at 5913 Longleaf Drive. I'd like to speak about one candidate, although I would like to say I think you have a whole slate of very qualified candidates, and I don't envy the decision you'll have to make. But 38 years ago, when I came to KU, I met a young student by the name of Scott Morgan, who was serving in the Student Senate. I was impressed with his maturity and his well-developed leadership skills at that point in his life and his career. I've known him ever since, and particularly since he and his wife returned to Lawrence, and my initial impressions of him have not diminished at all. Indeed, they've been increased. I'd like to just outline a few of what I think are Scott's skills and qualifications that would make him an excellent city commissioner. First of all, he's a very intelligent and a very knowledgeable young person, and he understands government processes and operations at the local, state, and national level with the career he has had. Secondly, he's a man of great integrity. I think his integrity is above reproach. Anyone who's worked or known Scott knows that what you see is what you get with Scott. Thirdly, he is an extremely honest and very objective individual. He is very, however, sensitive to differences in opinions and differences in perspective, and he respects those because one of his other great skills is his ability to be a very good listener. He is, however, quite willing to make very difficult and unpopular decision, as his time on the school board would illustrate. He has no agenda of his own other than to serve the community and do what is best for the community of Lawrence. And finally, if you know Scott, you know one of his great traits is his wonderful sense of humor that helps keep things in perspective and keeps us from getting far, far too serious. After having observed politics at the university, including student politics that Scott was involved in, and 38 years of observing politics here in the city, I think Scott's initial experiences at the university as a student senator will serve him well as a city commissioner. Thank you very much.
Other public comment?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Ken Easthouse. I was one of the 6 eliminated. Sometimes I wish it would have been bumped up to 7. Maybe I would have been able to join you fine fellows up here. And Lisa, I'm sorry. I don't think anyone could possibly follow things as closely as those of us who have been part of this process has through the entire part. I've read numerous things, probably did more Google searches for all of the other candidates than is healthy for a single human being to possibly do. Because of the entire process, I've read opinions from everyone. I've interacted with you guys outside in the hall. Yes, I was testing you. I don't think there is a better choice from my perspective than Mr. Joe O'Brien. I think he is approachable. I think he is open to different perspectives. I think he comes in with an open mind to any sort of discussion. And I think he has the ability to bring people who don't necessarily see eye to eye together. That, I think, is what's sorely missing. I think that individual who's the glue, who can bring everyone, not even necessarily to agreement, but to a consensus that it's the best that we can all get together. So, Joe, I just want to say I do publicly support you. I wish I could have been up here with you guys, but I support you. Finally, and this is anyone here would do well. Anyone. That being said, as an election official, I have to note that elections matter. And Dr. Reardon and Mr. Schauner, I agree with a lot of what both of you say. I like a lot of your policy positions on a lot of different things. But ultimately, elections matter. And the people have spoken in the last elections both of you were in. No.
Ken, could you visit with us?
I will.
Thank you.
Oh, now?
Well, yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Just saying, could you?
Yeah, could you,
I
direct your
apologize.
comments this way?
And I just want to remind everyone that elections do matter. And anyone who is in their last election for city commission have lost, I think it would send a horrible precedent to the city and the community of Lawrence that you're willing to ignore what the city has already voted on. So in those regards, good luck. I don't envy your guys' position tonight in choosing the next commissioner to sit with you. So thank you.
Other public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. My name's Ted Boyle, North Lawrence. I agree with the last speaker that elections are very important. But you know, here's the deal. This last election, there was only 16% of the registered voters that voted in this last election. And there's approximately about 64,000 registered voters in North Lawrence. I mean, in Lawrence, and probably most of them are in North Lawrence, but hey, we're good. I mean, we're good. That's how you guys got there, wasn't it? But, you know, when only 16% turns out to vote, you know, and out of 64,000 registered voters, what kind of message does that send? To me, it makes me feel embarrassed of the city of Lawrence, Kansas, that the people are registered voters. Now, it's one thing not to be a registered voter and don't vote, but to be a registered voter and don't vote, that's twice as bad. And so, yeah, elections are very important, but apparently they wasn't important enough to the 84% of the registered voters to get out and vote. So that being said, you know, this last election was, and really years before that, we haven't had a good voter turnout in probably a decade or two. You know, so how are you going to motivate as a governing body of the city of Lawrence to get people out to vote? If Rock Chalk Park couldn't get people out to vote, what the heck would? You know, burn down City Hall or something? Would that get it? Would that do it? You know, and that being said, I want to tell you, I know, you know, a couple of these people up here, and I respect them all, but I have to say that Dr. Reardon has the experience that some of the others don't, because he has been on the Planning Commission, and he's also been a city commissioner. He works well with people and the city of Lawrence, and works well with North Lawrence. And so, and he's had to make, like all of you will have to make, some bad decisions in the future that the public's not going to like. And you're going to have a thick skin, and you're going to have a sense of humor, or you're going to pull all your hair out. So, on that note, I highly recommend the doctor. Thank you.
Thanks. Other comment? But Diane was getting up to talk.
I was excited for that, actually.
Other
I have something to say about my outfit, too, though.
That's right. Other public comment? Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
I'm Sarah Taliaferro, and I'm actually here on behalf of Justice Matters tonight. And first of all, I'd like to thank you so much for all the questions that you asked and the follow-up questions. You brought up several of our concerns, as did the candidates in their discussions of those concerns, especially that of affordable housing. And I think you got some good answers of people who would be well equipped to make strategic decisions to support that as a goal of creating, maintaining, and expanding in our community. Thank you.
Public comment? Anyone else? Okay. Entertain a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second to close the public portion is made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Vice Mayor Soden. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? That passes 4-0. Well, the next item. Yeah, I did. Next item is to discuss the candidates and narrow the field to one or two candidates. Before we begin, again, thank you to all the candidates. As I said a minute ago, my suggestion to the commission, and I think that we need to have this discussion, is it appropriate, and would it be the feeling of the commission to recommend two people move forward to Tuesday night's meeting?
Yes.
Sure.
I'd be comfortable with either direction.
Okay. Stronger feeling one way or another?
I don't have any strong feelings.
Okay.
I guess my only question would be, should we choose to move forward with two, what would our procedure be on Tuesday to narrow to one?
Well, similar to what, you know, we will open nominations at that point and discussion
Okay, so there
of
wouldn't be
candidate.
any further
There's no other
formal
question.
activity?
No. I think we beat them up pretty good. A lot of thank yous there. But that would generally be the plan, would be to open it up to nominations and move ahead under those directions. We're allowed to do that, right? I haven't visited with you about that part yet.
The code says that the remaining 4 commissioners must elect the person by a majority vote.
Okay.
So that would be the appropriate steps to take on Tuesday.
There we go. Okay.
Would it be, I know that we're going to be casting ballots, would it be reasonable to take a look at our ballots before deciding that?
Sure.
In that if there's a clear top choice, that perhaps further deliberation may be unnecessary?
Could be. The ballot that you have before you lists 3 places. I would ask you to cast your ballot. Your top vote getter is number 1, gets 3 points. Second place, 2 points, and third place, 1. The top 2, you will sign that ballot, and again, it is a public record. And I visited with City Attorney this afternoon. We had talked about explaining or actually telling the people that we voted for so that there is no question, correct?
Correct. We want to make sure that the people watching at home have the opportunity to hear how you voted as well.
And this meets all, I guess, the requirements of Kansas open meetings, is that correct? And open
Correct.
record stuff, okay? So that's how it kind of works,
Sounds good to me.
okay? And you were suggesting that, I'm sorry.
Just a suggestion might be to, I'm uncomfortable with my own suggestion here because I realize it has the appearance of perhaps changing rules mid-game, but to look at the ballots after they're cast, if we have a clear separation between first and second, as in, in a world where all 4 of us, for instance, nominate the same individual as our top choice, I don't know that there's a lot of good in bringing 2 back if we all 4 have the same top choice. I don't necessarily think that will happen, but should that happen, is there a need to bring back 2?
we've even gone so far that in the event of a tie, you got a runoff ballot. Just in case. Not bad.
Damn, I did a lot of work for this.
No, this one came from Tony. I got to give credit where credit's due, just in case. So, no, that is the goal. One of the things that we could do, and I would suggest, is that we do have general discussion at this time. We're probably going to find out there may be or maybe not a difference in opinion of what that top vote getter, who it may be. We can cast, I suppose, as many ballots as need to, but I would think that there's probably going to be maybe some agreement, but probably some disagreement. So, okay, fair enough. Okay, so I'll open it up. Anything to say?
You want us to talk before we go?
Well, let's just talk.
All right.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I'll kind of open it up a little bit lighthearted, I guess, and then get into my serious thing, because that's kind of what I do. I was talking to my wife before we came here, and she reminded me on the way out the door that my directive this evening should be to vote for the individual who is clearly the weakest. With joking that obviously, Mike, you and I are going to have to run against this individual in 2 years. And to my disappointment, I arrived here tonight to find out that all 6 of them are going to beat me in 2 years. And so I think we have an opportunity tonight to choose somebody out of a group that is incredibly qualified. I would disagree with Mr. Dannenberg's comments declaring you all unqualified. I strongly disagree with that. I've had the opportunity to know some of you for quite some time, and those of you that I haven't known for quite some time, I read every word of your application. My wife and I sat here on Thursday night and listened to every word, when we did the narrowing down to 6, listened to every word of your answer, and I'll tell you, I'm truly impressed with everything that you have to say, and I think we are going to pick a strong 5th voice out of this group. One of the things I looked for tonight, coming in tonight knowing that we have 6 candidates and 5 of them are not going to be weak. There's not going to be a clear winner. As I look for the degree to which they want this job, the one question I keep getting asked, and Stuart and Leslie, you might be the same, people keep saying, well, are you glad you did it? People keep asking me that, and I think that's a real serious question. And one of the things I looked for tonight in their answers are these people that actually want to do this. Now, obviously they do. They applied. There's not one of them running for the door right now, right? But in their answers, there were some answers that, to me, they were good answers, but they felt very, I went home last night and I typed this up because this is what I should say because it will impress the commissioners. And there were others that I thought were jumping out of their seat at the opportunity to say the things they got to say. And in some cases, literally jumping out of their seat. I thought Joe was coming after us. I was calling for security. And to me, that is one thing that I loved about Joe O'Brien this evening was the passion that he brought. I listening to his responses. This is a guy that wants to be part of this body very badly. This is a guy who cares very deeply about his community, and this is a guy who, he may have typed up his responses ahead of time. I don't know. But I felt, if this is a thing you can actually objectively monitor, I felt like what he was saying came from his heart, and I felt like that passion that he brought here tonight, he would bring up here in the future. So I don't know where you'd put him on your ballot, but I know that Joe O'Brien will be on my ballot.
Others?
Well, one of the things that I was considering is a lot of what we do are value judgments, and I think a couple people said that. There's competing values that we're constantly working with every week, and there is no right or wrong. There are competing values, and it's just which to you is a stronger decision. You have to choose that value that you're going to uphold over another value. So to me, it was a matter of going through the applications, and I did watch the 4 hours streaming live, and then tonight is which of these people seem to share the same core values, because to me, hopefully that will inform their decision making. You know, what you say up there with limited amount of information and what you might say up here with a tremendous amount of information are different things, but it's that core value that I'm looking at. So my decisions are all based on that, which I kind of struggled. I had a top 4, so getting it down to 3 was a little difficult, but I feel like I have my choices, and that's what I based them on.
I just want to say thank you to you all. You have stepped forward to serve your community, and you've made yourselves available and put yourselves out there, and that's tough. There are folks who say that this is all a sham, that we already know who we're going to pick. There couldn't be anything further from the truth. And I think the mayor will bear witness to that. What you're doing is trying to complete us. The task is to represent the people of Lawrence, and we have to look at 6 very qualified people and say, not what's good about you, but also what do we need to be a complete commission. And that's tough. One thing I would say is that I've been very impressed with Lisa Larson. I think scientists are underrepresented on this commission, and I admire, you know, your business, your experience, and I really appreciate everybody. But I think Lisa's my top.
Well, you know, this is like the toughest spot around. You have to remember that 2 of these people I had the great fortune of being able to serve with over a couple, 2 terms, 1 term, whatever it was. But in a lot of cases, I know that there's times that it felt like a lifetime. Sometimes I could be a thorn in your tails, and sometimes, you know, we disagree, as David brought up. But you know, it's kind of hard, you know, because there does become friendships that happen, and sometimes it's kind of hard to talk when you have friends in the room, especially when you're talking about them and all the fun stuff that goes on there. But one of the things that I have been given the opportunity to do is being able to be a part of a selection committee that is going to make a decision about who we move to be a part of this body next Tuesday night. A couple of things that I probably looked at was there was experience. I did look at that, and I appreciated the work done by any of the incumbents from both this body and the school board. I think that there was we saw some of that as being important. But one of the things that I look at, and maybe even a little bit more important, is one of the things that we hear so much about is the expenditure of dollars and how we are tasked with spending dollars. And I appreciate all the comments from the question that Commissioner Herbert asked about the $100,000, and I do appreciate the comments that you all had regarding that item, whether it would be yes or no, whether you're going to support $60,000 or $100,000 or whatever it was going to be. I do appreciate your comments there. But one of the things that we do have coming forward, and something that is important to me, is that business experience, call it what it is. I'm a small business person. I own a business. And I know that one of the things that I look at is how important is that in this decision. To me, it's extremely important. I look at 3 people or 4 people, I think, in this case, that are business owners. I look at Mr. Watson, Dr. Reardon. I know you own your practice, and I know there's a lot of business there. Lisa, the work, your company, and Scott, obviously, your company. And one of the things that we do have is we have an extremely tough decision coming up, and I know that you folks have been involved with a lot of the hiring experience. Scott, I mean, obviously, as I read your deal, your application, and realized that, you know, you were involved with, you know, superintendent hires. At least I know that you hire people all the time. Terry, I'm sure that you're looking for partners from time to time. Carl, you're obviously filling engineering slots. And so I'm sitting there thinking, now I've got it from 6 to maybe 2. Or 6 to 4. And so now I'm saying, well, okay, where do I go from here? Well, there's another thing that probably moves an individual to the top for me, and it's because we may share, and, you know, we have completely different businesses, but we share, in something that was brought up tonight, we share the same neighborhood, and a neighborhood that is extremely important to this community, and that is our downtown. And Mr. Watson, I think, brings something forward, as I see to this commission, is another, what I would see is supporter of downtown, as being somebody there. Now, that's not to say that I'm taken away from anyone else, because I know we're more than capable, we have more than capable people to take care of it. But at this point, what we have for me, as I look at one who can represent, you know, as my number one pick, the things that I would share, and I believe that a majority of that voting public would share, would be Mr. Watson. That would be my number one. Now, I want you to know, whoever we decide from this group, and that one of these people in this group right here is going to be the next commissioner. I am convinced of that. I will work hard with all of them, or any one of them. So that's where we are right now. Okay?
I guess I didn't say my top pick.
No.
Sorry.
We all showed our cards.
I guess this is part B. So, as I said, you know, I was looking for the similar values. I think a lot of people actually had really good experience, good government experience, a lot of good small business experience that you were talking about. I think diversity is really important. So all those things together is what put Lisa Larson to the top of my list.
Okay. You know, there's another thing that was brought up a lot by, you know, these candidates also, and I think that we heard it a lot, and something that we're going to be hearing a lot over the next several years, and it's more of like a strategic planning process. I mean, I'd never heard so much talk about planning and the need for more planning, and you know, there was a number of people that, you know, and here again, there's not a whole lot of difference between one and number two, and either one can do the job, and you know, we're going to get into that situation a little bit, but I don't know. Good Lord, this is the toughest thing that I've done lately. Anyway, we're at a point that I guess we could, I don't know how much more discussion you want. We could take a first ballot.
Well, yeah, I mean, my whole thought with possibly narrowing it down to the chosen one tonight was on the pie in the sky notion that somehow we might all open our mouths and the same name would come out, which clearly did not happen.
Right.
So having seen that not happen, I would say we should move forward with our plan to nominate two for Tuesday.
Yeah, I think that one would be, you know, obvious choice to move to. And, you know, I wanted to say, I don't know, slot number 2 with 2 points each, if number 2 gets 4 or gets all 4 votes, that person's in the number 1 slot.
Yeah. No,
So
that's how life goes sometimes.
that's how life is. Want everybody to know that. I ran for office wanting to be third on everybody's ballot. Sometimes it works.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
And this is not in any way to try to persuade any of you, because this is a compliment to all of them, I believe. But tonight I walked in feeling like I was interviewing them, feeling like somehow I might have a higher standing in the world. And then we got to the question, what do you think a commissioner can do to encourage constructive conversations on controversial issues? And I listened as 6 people taught me a very important lesson. And I leave here feeling like I'm going to be better at this job going forth because of what 6 people said. I don't know.
7. That's my question.
Yeah, but you didn't. All right, so I've already failed to be a teammate. But there were a couple things I want to repeat, and I hope I don't misquote anybody here. But you know, Scott Morgan points out, you know, you never question the motives of another commissioner, and it reminds me of a conversation that I had. You know, I have a lot of conversations with Mike after meetings are over, and I don't know if you realize this or not, but you have a pretty big influence in my life, and. You know, he pulled me aside one night after a meeting, and he said, you know, we're not taking this to our grave. At the end of the day, no matter how you
I
vote.
shouldn't say that very loud.
Well, yeah, sorry. Yeah, you said at the end of the day, no matter how we vote, we're going to be friends. You know, and that's, when I heard Scott, you know, you never question the motives of another commissioner. It's kind of an aha moment, and I appreciate you saying that, and that's a very wise thing for you to say. Joe O'Brien, his quote, "Deliberation is necessary and it is good." You know, that those conversations, it's not a moment of conflict. It's a moment of hoping for a more positive outcome. You know, David Schauner, the more conversation you have, the better. You know, these are all comments that I heard on that question, and I just want you to know that I felt like on that one, you all were the expert, and I was certainly the novice, and so I heard what you said, and I hope to grow as a commissioner myself from your comments on that.
Yeah, I was taking all of these notes because to me this was an opportunity to get 6 people's ideas on all of these things, you know, because obviously we don't have the whole future mapped out for us, and so the more ideas we got them captured, I will hold on to this. Thank you. I'm going to steal your ideas. But I will give credit when I do.
Well, it is true, you have all made us better commissioners. We appreciate that. Okay. So,
Take a first ballot.
first ballot. And we will vote for all 3 at this point, okay? You can give them to me real quick. And I am going to recommend that the vice mayor sit in on the tabulation, if that's okay, if you gentlemen will agree. Fair enough. Leslie, you willing to sit in on that?
I would love to sit in on that.
They're up to you then.
Don't let them see you counting on your hands.
Should have left the big numbers in. The top two on the ballots cast. And do we give the number of points, Tony?
It's up to you.
Okay,
It'll be
well,
public
okay.
eventually.
Well, then it's public now. Lisa Larson with 8, and Scott Morgan with 5. Yeah, no. At this time, I would ask each commissioner to read from their ballot. I'll go first. It'll be fine. Number 1, Carl Watson. Number 2, Scott Morgan. Number 3, Lisa Larson. Vice Mayor?
I had number 1, Lisa Larson, number 2, David Shawner, number 3, Joe O'Brien.
Number 1, Lisa Larson. Number 2, David Shawner. Number 3, Scott Morgan.
I had number 1, Joe O'Brien, number 2, Scott Morgan, number 3, Lisa Larson.
Okay, if I could have these ballots back so that they're part of and available to the public upon request. So on Tuesday night, we will direct staff to add the names of Lisa Larson and Scott Morgan as the 2 finalists for consideration to fill the vacancy. It was created recently, and we will have final decision that night through the nominating process and regular public vote that we have. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations to all of you. Lawrence is truly a better community tonight. I believe this from the work that you have all put into this. I can't thank you enough for your willingness to step up. I mean, it's incredible. The 14 people that we had that started this process have meant a lot. You know, sometimes I was thinking about what I would say, because the tough part is saying goodbye to 4 friends, but realizing too that a lot of times, you know, this is not a situation of, you know, this is the end. This is the only beginning of your career. Sometimes this is not yet, you know, as where we are in this. And not yet means I've got more people to appoint to boards. So I would encourage any of you who wish to participate in this great building and in this great community continue, please contact me or other commissioners, fill out the applications. We will get you involved. But this has been a great exchange of ideas, and I want to thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing the 2 finalists on Tuesday evening, 5:45. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Russell?
I do have a comment. I don't know if anyone remembers, but I actually lost my first election by 95 votes. I came in 4th place, so this is not defeat. This is definitely not defeat. This is just one step in the next direction.
You know, Commissioner Herbert brought up something a minute ago about, you know, how much you want to do this, okay? And I get asked a lot of times, you know, do you still like doing this? I love doing this job. And as I said, you know, sometimes there's friends involved, and I want everybody to understand there's nothing personal to this. And I just appreciate all the work that you all have done. So thank you all. Gentlemen, do you have anything? Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Motion made and second to adjourn. Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you all.